Room and dust. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Kim? Yeah. And then we have this mic here.
Okay.
For anybody that speaks or whatever. How are you?
The bathroom has a Coke machine.
Yes.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
would work for us. Getting accustomed to Coke.
Yeah. You gotta do what you gotta do. Who's the same girl in the front? I don't think
I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Maybe I'll go introduce myself. Are we about to start? Or have
Yeah,
2 minutes?
just, we have about a minute. Couple minutes.
Find out if she-
Oh. Hi, Jamie. I'm Becky.
Nice
Got
to
your
meet you.
email
Yes.
yesterday,
Yes.
so-
So it's nice to put a face to who I was about. So I'm new to all this. Well, they threw me in last year, and so I muddled my way through. I'm hoping that this year will be better.
Why don't you move over? That way you're not by yourself.
Oh.
That's Guadalupe.
Yeah.
At least charter. I have so much stuff. That's the old stories. I just have to be in the front so I can see. Should bring my boss.
I thought we were gonna get this because of,
I know, such a weird time of
I
year.
know.
I know some people are online. Sarah Roberts is going to be listening online, and some of the charters that were from the southern part of the state I know are going to be online.
Do you know who the girl is on the very far end?
I don't. We'll have to.
I'll do the second.
Okay, Jeff, thank you for being kind of a.
All right. Now it's time to get breakfast, but I didn't. Yeah, and they only have that option or diet. I live up my diet, so. This is Paul. Hi. And where do you work? Mary? Springfield. Not horrible. I think it's, yes, it is. So where are you guys? We're at Guadalupe here in Rose Park.
5, 6,
What grade?
got
I
the
take
chairs.
8.
Yeah, they kind of.
Oh,
Go back.
They do. They do.
our kids do. A little bit of a drive. But our buses will love that.
I think we're about ready.
Should we have gotten those books?
Yeah, I'll talk to you about them. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have some other people who are joining us online. We appreciate you being here, either in person or those that are listening from home or at their offices. We know this is an unusual time of year to hold this meeting. The reason for that is we were all working very hard on the ESSA draft plan. The feds had released an initial template for that plan in January or last fall, and then in March, the middle of March, Congress voted to rescind the final regulations for some of the regulations for ESSA, and they also pulled that plan template back and issued a new plan template the middle of March, which was very different from the original template we had been working from. So we had to kind of regroup and, as a whole agency, go back to work on putting that draft together. The other thing that confounded things was the fact that Congress had not put out a budget bill. So we didn't have our final appropriations from last school year until a couple of weeks ago. So you will be getting a reallocation amount that reflects the final budget for the federal fiscal year 16, which started last July. So you'll be seeing those coming through on your UCA. We also got preliminary budgets for federal fiscal year 17, which is actually the state's fiscal year 18, which begins in July. And so our finance people have been working, and Sandy went up to check with them earlier this morning. They've been working on it, but she's shaking her head saying they still don't have those preliminary allocations yet for you. Hopefully we'll have those for you very soon. So it was just a matter of things that were going on at the federal level, changes that were taking place here, that required us to delay the meeting. So I welcome you. I'd like to introduce my staff quickly, and then we're going to walk you through the website, the ESSA website that's online, so that you can access those materials. Jeff Ojeda is going to come up and run that for us and show you where to do that. We really need your feedback on that ESSA plan. So here with me today we have Dr. Chuck Foster in the back. Many of you know Chuck. Chuck's been here a number of years. He is our Title VI Indian Education Specialist. Wonderful person to work with. We love having Chuck on our staff. Dr. Max Lang is our Migrant Education Specialist and also School Improvement. Next to Max is Kim Augustin. Kim joined us in September from Davis School District. Kim is working with 21st Century Community Learning Centers, which is Title IV-B. She also is over the gang prevention grants, Senate Bill 67 partnerships for student success, intergenerational poverty grants. So Kim does a variety of things with us. Lisa Wisham has been here a number of years. Lisa does all of the same tasks that Kim does, and unfortunately, it's hard to announce this today, but Lisa's going to be leaving the USBE in mid-July. She's accepted a position at the Utah Education Policy Center. So we wish her well. It's an opportunity for her to spread her wings a little bit and try some different things, and we will greatly miss her here. We are hoping to be able to replace her position. Sandra Grant is our Fiscal Compliance and Monitoring Specialist. Robert Palmer joined us from Salt Lake City School District in January. Robert is assisting us in our efforts for school improvement, and we really are excited to have Robert. He's a wonderful addition to our team. You know Jeff Ojeda. Jeff is our McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Specialist and also works with school improvement. Dr. Christelle Estrada was unable to be here today. She's our Title III specialist. And Murray Mazzaros is our Title I-D specialist, which is neglected and delinquent. He's currently in Washington, D.C., attending meetings with the Department of Education. So he is not with us today either. I want to thank my wonderful assistant, Becky Peters, for making sure things were set up, copies were made. She made arrangements to have the live streaming done for us today. So she's always a tremendous help to all of us. My colleague, Dr. Leah Voorhees, who's actually the interim special education director now. Many of you are probably aware that Glenna Gallo has accepted a position with the Washington State Department of Education, where she will be at the superintendency level. So she'll be leaving us and starting in Washington on July 1. So Leah Voorhees is the interim special education director. This is a copy of the least restrictive behavior intervention manual that was put together, and she brought down copies that are on a cart back there. Please take as many copies of this as you would like for your district or school. Those will be available there during the break and as you leave the meeting today. So I'm going to ask Jeff to come up now, and we're going to walk you through how to locate the draft of the state's ESSA plan. How many of you have had an opportunity to look at that plan? Okay, few of you, not very many. So if you look here on the main web page where it says popular links, where there Jeff is working there with the cursor, he's going to click right there where it says Utah's ESSA plan. This takes you to a page on the Utah Education Network. Okay, so if you look up there, I'm going to have Jeff first of all go to resources, if you would. This is where the plan is located. So the draft of Utah's plan is right there. So I'm going to have Jeff click there so you can see that. The plan is, as you can see, is 109 pages as it currently exists. And I want to emphasize this is a draft, and we really are truly seeking feedback from as many stakeholders around the state as we can possibly get. So educators within your LEAs, parents, teachers, community members. We really need a lot of eyes on this plan and a lot of good thinking around it so that we can make it the best possible plan that it can be. So there's the actual plan. Jeff's kind of scrolling through that a little bit. I'm going to have him go back now so that we can show you some of the other things that are located there. So Jeff, would you go to resources for a minute? Oh, okay, that's where it was. If you'll scroll down a little bit, there's a copy of the State Board Strategic Plan and Educated Elevated, which are the two leading documents that the state is using to formulate our ESSA plan, to make sure that we are going to be working toward meeting the goals of the state. Our state legislature this past session passed Senate Bill 220, which made changes to the accountability system. Ann Michelle Neal is here. She's our new accountability specialist. She's going to talk to you about that, but the actual legislation is also posted here at this site. A link to the U.S. Department of Education's ESSA web page where you can locate some of the resources that they have made available. Okay, so if Jeff will go back out of there for a minute, I'm going to ask him to go to public comment. So you'll notice there's a link again to the draft plan, and then there's a spreadsheet where you can enter in, I'm going to have him scroll down if you would, what your primary role is as a reviewer of the plan. Are you living in a rural, suburban, or urban area of the state? Which county? This will be anonymous. And then it will go into the section. So on Title I, Part A, and this is talking about specific sections and questions that have been responded to. There's a box there for you to put in your specific feedback about those particular items on the plan. So once you do that and you click submit, that information will be aggregated here and in a format that people then can go back and analyze and look for trends in that data, create a frequently asked questions document based on the feedback, and make potential revisions to the draft plan before it is submitted. So we wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Let's see, Jeff, if you would go back out again. There are also some webinars that have been taking place. Is that on the resources page? I can't remember where they put that. We'll have Jeff look there again. I was just looking at this last night. Check on the press release. I think it might link to it from the press release. Or it might be there as well. But anyway, there was a webinar recorded on June 9th. Here it is. So you can see on June 9th the sections of the plan that were discussed. And that webinar was recorded in both English, and Jeff translated it into Spanish. The second webinar took place this week on the 14th. Those were the sections, Title 4, A and B, and Title 2. That webinar is currently, Jeff is currently working on the Spanish translation, and then that webinar will be posted. The final webinar, which is on Part A, Title 1 Part A, will take place next Tuesday. And all of those webinars stream live beginning at 2 p.m. on those dates. And then, as I said, will be archived and people can go back and listen to them later. The purpose of those webinars is to provide broader outreach to the public. So the information on the webinar slides, the information being shared, we're trying to provide it in a format that any stakeholder could understand. So it's not going to be using a lot of the technical terms that we may be discussing in this meeting today, but to try to get information out to a broader audience. So we wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And then if you go to the Contact Us page, Jeff, it lists the people that you can contact if you have specific questions about one of those specific titles in the ESSA plan. And so it will link to that person's email, and their contact information will come up there. So I want to thank Jeff for coming up and assisting us with that, but please go in and provide your feedback. This went live on June 7th, and I don't think to date there's been a great deal of feedback received. And so it's really critical for you as LEA Title I directors, coordinators, support staff for those programs that your voices are heard and that you involve some of the other stakeholders within your LEA in providing that feedback. Okay, thank you, Jeff. So if you'll click out of there. What questions do you have at this point in time about how any of that is going to be handled? Any questions? Okay, thank you. Yeah, pull that up and get it into slide format. So we're going to go through this PowerPoint now, and there's a lot of information on these slides. We are not going to read every bit of information today that's on there, of course. But I wanted you to be able to have this information, and it will be posted. We didn't make copies of this PowerPoint, but we'll send it out to you. It will also be posted on our website, and then of course it will be, this is being recorded. So again, we've got information in there about the links to the website. So it's available for comment through July 7th. Then in August, the plan will be presented to Governor Herbert and the legislature. And then the state board will have their opportunities to continue to look at it and help the plan be refined. The deadline for all states to submit plans is September 18th. So Utah will submit on or before that date. ESSA legislation goes into effect in August of this year. So the bill was signed into law in December of 2015. It goes into effect in August of 17. There's an important document, and I believe Becky Peters made copies of this for you. There are a number of fiscal changes that have taken place under ESSA. So I believe she made a copy of that should be in your packet. It looks like this. It's the non-regulatory guidance dealing with fiscal changes and equitable service requirements under the Elementary Secondary Education Act as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act. So I encourage you to read this document. We'll also make sure that this goes out electronically and will be posted on our website. It's also available, of course, at the U.S. Department of Education's website, which is what this link goes to right here. So we'll talk through a little bit of those things today. We won't be able to get into all of it in the amount of time we have this morning. This chart was presented to the school board in May by Dr. Rich Nye and Dr. Patty Norman, two members of our superintendency. It was put together by the legislative fiscal analyst and kind of gives you an overall bird's eye view of the budget for public education in the state of Utah. So you notice up there that federal funding comprises 11% of the total amount of funding that we have available to us for public education. So a chunk of that money are all of the programs that are part of ESSA, all of the title programs, but in addition there's money for adult education, career and technical education, child nutrition programs, special education, and a variety of other smaller, sometimes they're competitive grant programs and other things that comprise that portion of that budget. So we know that the bulk of our money comes through the state legislature. We also have local property taxes, bonds, those kinds of things that comprise that funding. These are the programs that are in ESSA. And the amount of funding you see there are what was received previously for our federal fiscal year 16 allocations. And as I said, Congress passed an omnibus budget bill that finally did away with the continuing budget resolution we had been under, and we finally have the final appropriations for federal fiscal year 16 that we just got 2 weeks ago. So some of those amounts may have changed slightly. But those are all of the title programs that are in ESSA that Utah will be applying for in its consolidated ESSA state plan when it submits it to the federal government. Many of your districts get multiple parts of that funding. There are some of those that are targeted to specific programs that not all LEAs participate in, but you're all here because of Title I, which all of you get. Yes? With what? Title II-A for federal fiscal year 17, which begins this summer, which is state fiscal year 18, Title II is in place. Title IV-B, which is 21st Century Community Centers, will have funding for this coming school year. The President's budget proposal was for federal fiscal year 2018, which would impact the 2018-19 school year. And right now his budget is just a proposal. Congress hasn't acted on that budget. There's been a lot of feedback from a variety of stakeholder groups regarding his budget. So at this point in time, we don't know where that will go. But for this coming school year, Title II-A funding will be there. If you have 21st Century Community Learning Center funding, that funding will be there. It's the following school year that will be impacted. Any other questions about that? And thanks for bringing that up, Lynette. That was great clarification on that. Again, that's why on these slides I've indicated where it's federal fiscal year compared to state fiscal year. Because even people here at our agency sometimes get that confused. We have to keep saying, we're talking about federal funds from this year. You're talking about state funds, and it gets really confusing. So out of that funding that we had for fiscal year 16, and this includes a decrease because some of that money had to be set aside for priority and focus school funding. 40 school districts accept Title I funds, and they serve 221 elementaries, 23 secondary schools. We also have 83 charter schools that receive Title I funding. Some of those schools are K-8 or some K-12, so it's a little bit harder to divide those into elementary, secondary. So we have approximately 324 schools receiving Title I. 80 of those schools operate targeted assistance programs, primarily because their poverty rates are below 40%. The majority of schools are operating Title I school-wide programs. Uh-oh. Jeff, somebody do something to it. So here is the link to the Department of Ed's webpage where there's more information and guidance if you're looking for it on Title I-A. So under ESSA, the basic funding formula for how states receive Title I funding did not change. The formula has been in place for a number of years. It remains. The 1% cap on set-asides for state administrative funds remains the same. But there are some new state-level set-asides that will impact the amount of money available to go out to local education agencies. The first one is really important. This is a mandatory 7% set-aside. It comes off the top of the state's Title I-A allocation, and that is set aside for school improvement interventions under ESSA. 5% of that amount is used for administering the programs, technical assistance, monitoring. 95% of that 7% set aside goes out, and it can go out either by formula, it can go out by through a competitive grant process, or it can be a combination of formula with some competitive points, priority points. When we held our school and district improvement work groups for ESSA, multiple sessions last fall, the people on that committee recommended that we use a hybrid approach in Utah. Because we know there are some districts that have additional personnel and additional ability to maybe shine on a competitive application that may disadvantage some rural districts or charter schools that don't have those personnel available. But at the same time, we want to make sure that funding is going to LEAs and schools that really have rigorous plans to take that money and leverage the funding to do meaningful school improvement. Not just money to keep maintaining the status quo that hasn't really led to the kind of results that this school needs to have. The thing you need to be aware of for this coming school year is that there is no hold harmless provision for LEAs the first year. It's mandatory that the state set aside the 7%. After the first year, then the hold harmless for LEA, that provision will start to kick in. The second state level set aside, and from my perspective, and we'll get your feedback today, is that we don't set this aside, would be an additional 3% set aside off the top of the state's amount. for a program called Direct Student Services. That money would have to be distributed to LEAs on a competitive basis, and priority would go to LEAs with schools identified for improvement, and these would be some of the things you could do with the funding. However, those are all things you can currently do with your Title I funding. So most of the state directors I have talked to the past year have all said, why would we want to pull more funding away from our local LEAs, and then the state would have to manage another competitive program? So, and I met with our finance people a couple of weeks ago and just said, I really don't think we need to set that aside. So does anybody have a strong preference to say, yes, you need to set it aside, or are you good with, because it would result in another decrease to the funding that would be available to your LEA. Okay, thank you, Steve. So, let's see, I think this is the next one, yes. So as far as the set aside, again, I've got that no hold harmless there because it's been confusing for people. So that 7% had to either be the amount we had set aside in federal fiscal year 16 for non-competitive school improvement, plus the amount we got for the competitive SIG grants. Okay, SIG is going away under ESSA. That program will be grandfathering out. So that's why they raised the set aside from, it had been 4% previously, they raised it to 7% to help offset the fact that that competitive SIG money would no longer be available. Under ESSA, a school can have a school improvement subgrant for up to 4 years, and one of those years can include a planning year now. So the year that the school is identified, they would have their school appraisal, they would work on developing a school improvement plan. So that first year gives them that time to really meet and thoughtfully do those things, and then it would give them up to 3 years for implementation of their plan. They can't have a grant for more than 4 years. Okay. So again, that's some information on what we've done or what we're doing currently under the flexibility waiver. We had priority schools. So to get a subgrant under ESSA, the LEA has to submit an application. And in that application, the LEA has to describe how the LEA itself will provide support to the schools that have been identified in need of improvement. So they've really put more emphasis on the role of the LEA in school improvement under ESSA, which I think is a really important thing. These schools exist within, a system that includes a district or other, structures, other systems that need to support that school in doing the kinds of work that will lead to meaningful improvement. So LEAs would get priority depending on the number of schools or percentage of schools that they have that are in improvement, the need that they have for these funds, and also the greatest commitment on the part of the LEA to provide their support. And school improvement plans now have to include evidence-based practices, which is a move from NCLB. There were multiple references throughout the NCLB legislation about research-based. They've moved now to evidence-based. So the practice has to have an established, rigorous research evidence to prove that that particular practice or strategy or framework will lead to improvement among various populations of students, or in high schools, or in very rural schools, or whatever the setting happens to be. Okay, again, there's some information on that optional 3% for direct student services, again with the note that it would reduce funding to the LEA. Again, if states were to do that and districts received those funds, these would be the kinds of things that would occur at the local level. So what about set-asides at your level? It's been a requirement now for quite a while. You have to set aside a reasonable, a necessary amount for homeless students that may reside within your LEA. In the past, this applied to homeless students that were students at non-participating Title I schools. That provision now has changed. So this applies to homeless in any situation within your LEA. So it could be kids that are institutionalized for neglected and delinquent purposes, children that are under foster care placement. It can impact early childhood programs, preschool, and other things for younger children. There's the 1% remains for parent and family engagement. 90% of that amount has to be allocated out to schools so that they can conduct parent and family engagement activities. The exception to that, of course, is if your LEA, if that 1% would be less than a total of $5,000, then you're not required to set aside the full 1%. There's also a 5% set aside LEAs can choose to do if they want to offer public school choice and to provide that funding toward transportation. So if students are enrolled in a school that's in improvement and the parents come in and say, we'd rather have our child attend a higher performing school, then some of that funding can help provide that transportation to those students. Ranking and serving schools has not changed a lot. There are a few changes that have occurred. But again, you have to serve your school strictly in order from highest to lowest poverty. The requirement remains if you have schools that have 75% poverty or higher, they must be served by Title I, regardless of the grade span. But LEAs have an option now if they want to include high schools that have 50% or more poverty. Because we know often at the high school level it's difficult to get an accurate count because a lot of students and parents don't want to submit paperwork indicating that they would qualify for those provisions. And then after you've served those schools, then you would rank again in order any of your schools that have at or below 75% poverty. And when you get to that point in your rankings, you can choose to rank by grade span. So you may choose to serve elementary schools and maybe some middle or junior high schools. That again is the choice of the LEA at that point. Any questions so far about any of those requirements in ESSA? Yes.
Transportation requirement, is that new?
Yes, and it's optional.
Oh, it's optional.
Yeah, it's
I just
optional.
worried about rural areas. You know,
Yes.
that would be because
When you're busing kids 20, 30 miles from one school to the next, or yeah, maybe even further than that. In cases like San Juan, if they had to bus a student from Monument Valley to Monticello, that could be a problem. All right, let's talk a little bit more about school improvement. Oh, sorry, Kathy.
I just had a question. Like,
Yes.
with new requirements for foster
Yes.
is that 5
I'm not absolutely certain. There is guidance on children that are in foster care and how it relates to federal funding. We'll do some research and I'll make sure you have access to that information as well. There was new guidance that came out several months ago about that specific issue. Any other questions? Okay, school improvement in ESSA. There are some changes here. So first of all, let's look at where we're currently at. So under our flexibility waiver from NCLB, we were required to identify priority and focus schools. Okay? And those identifications under that flex waiver were effective through August of last year. However, the Department of Ed indicated that 2016-17 school year was sort of a transition year. So our priority and focus school list was frozen. We didn't exit any schools from the list, and we didn't identify any new schools during last school year. And those schools had to continue to implement their improvement plans. They had to continue notifying parents that the school is in improvement, continue to look at, their data, how are they doing, there were quarterly progress reports, etc. Okay, this is what's going to happen for this coming school year. We have flexibility this year. We will not identify schools under ESSA until 2018-19. So for this coming school year, I've met with the data and statistics staff. They're going to run the data this coming fall when we get all the spring data from 2017 assessments. And we will review schools based on the exit criteria that have been set up previously for focus and priority schools. If those schools have met that exit criteria, they will come off the list. However, if any of those schools are currently on the Cohort 1 list for state turnaround, that does not remove them from turnaround. The Cohort 1 turnaround schools will still remain in turnaround through next school year at a minimum, and then they will be reviewed to see what progress they've made. If a priority or focus school does not meet that exit criteria, they remain in priority or focus status. And they will continue to receive support, technical assistance, monitoring, and possibly some additional school improvement funding. Yes, Andy?
Last, in the frozen year, we received.
Yes, you received some funding. Yeah, if you were still on the list for this coming school year, you would receive some additional funding, some support, all of those kinds of things. So questions about that, because a number of you have schools that are currently on that priority and focus list. And we want to make sure as well that this information goes out to the principals of those schools, because many of them have been emailing with questions or have had their school support team members contacting us with questions. Jane Ann? We won't be able to do that until data and statistics have got all the clean data that they can run the statistics on. So this was the exit criteria for priority schools that was set up under the flex waiver. Priority schools are schools that were within the bottom 5% of all Title I schools in the state. So to exit that, the school would have to have a minimum 2-year average on the SAFAR report that would put them above the lowest performing 15% of Title I schools in the state. Okay? Focus schools. Some focus schools were in for performance. Others were in because of graduation. So they will exit based on what the reason for them being identified. So if they were a high school that had a graduation rate that had been less than 60% at the time they were identified, you have to have a 2-year average grad rate of over 60%. If they were in due to their performance, Priority or focus schools, when they were identified, comprise the lowest 6% to 15% of all Title I schools. They would have to have a 2-year average score that would put them at or above the 25% of all the Title I schools in the state. Okay, questions? Okay, under ESSA, school improvement changes somewhat. There will be 2 categories of school improvement, but the names change. The first category is comprehensive support and improvement, or CSI schools. Those schools will be under the direction of state, so they'll have to have a plan submitted to the state, quarterly reports, all of that kind of stuff as priority and focus schools have had in the past. The second level of schools are called targeted support and intervention. Those schools, we will notify LEAs of those schools each year, and it is on the LEA's shoulders to intervene in those schools and monitor the progress of those schools. So we'll talk a little bit more about how this is going to work. So for comprehensive support and improvement, this will start in 2018-19 when we have that data to look at in the fall. And then at least once every 3 years, states have to identify these CSI schools. So it includes some different groups. First of all, it's not less than the lowest 5% of Title I schools in the state. But the second group is any public high school with a graduation rate at or below 67%. So the high school does not have to be receiving Title I funds, but any public high school. And the discussion that's going on right now is how this will impact alternative high schools in the state. Because the feedback we're receiving from the U.S. Department of Education is any public high school that receives state funding, and that would include our alternative high schools, would be caught up in this. So that's going to be some things that will be discussed here with the state board, and we'll have to have some stakeholder input on that. And then eventually, if a school is identified for targeted support and intervention, but they are a Title I school and they haven't improved after several years, and so we're looking at possibly 2021-22, those schools would then be elevated to comprehensive and support level, but only if they're a Title I school. So here are the pages where you can see in the state plan. States also have the flexibility to identify other categories of schools, and so in Utah, our state legislature a couple of years ago had implemented the State Turnaround and Leadership Development Act, and so we have schools participating in that. Those are any public school that's in the bottom 3% of all schools in the state, and it doesn't matter if they're Title I or non-Title I. Kathy?
So if the district of LEA has a turnaround school that was identified for the 1 year, now the plan is 2 years, that school doesn't come out in the bottom 10 of 1 year.
Yes, cohort 2 of turnaround are just sort of tentative right now. Because originally the Turnaround and Leadership Development Act passed by the legislature, they were identifying schools every year that were in the bottom 3% of schools based on 1 year of data. In the past legislative session, they revised that original legislation under Senate Bill 234, and now it says 2 consecutive years in the bottom 3%. So the cohort 1 turnaround schools are in. They'll be starting their 3rd year of turnaround in the fall. But the schools identified for cohort 2 may or may not be in. It will be determined whether or not they're still in that bottom 3% this second year. Does that make sense?
So they do exit if they're not.
Yeah, they will not be on the list if they are not in again for the second year. Okay. So again, going back to comprehensive support and intervention. Remember, these are the lowest 5% of Title I schools, any public high school with a graduation rate at or below 67%. And eventually, any targeted support schools that elevate to that level. Again, they would have to have a needs assessment, appraisal. They would have to develop a plan that addresses all of the state's accountability indicators. Any school that receives federal school improvement dollars must include evidence-based interventions in their plan in order to receive that funding. They have to look at resource inequities. So looking at all of the funding that comes into a building, how is that funding being leveraged? Is it being very siloed? Is it looked at holistically as these are our overall goals for our students? How can we leverage the funding coming into the school to really focus on this improvement plan? The plan must include input from parents, teachers, community. It can't be a plan that's written in the office by the principal or written at the district by a district staff member or even written with a leadership team. Everybody has to have opportunities for input into that plan because they have to own it. Okay, I can write a plan and it can be a great plan and I can be really proud of it, but that doesn't mean my team is going to want to implement the plan because it's my plan. If I don't involve them and get their feedback, then they don't have any ownership in it. They're not going to help me execute the plan. CSI plans have to be approved at the school. They have to be approved at the district level. And you'd have to probably, take that to your local Board of Education as an information item. And then they'll be reviewed and approved at the state level. And it'll require, periodic monitoring and review as we've currently been doing. Okay, there is a guidance document on evidence. And there's the link. It's only a few pages. I don't think Becky put this in your packet because I didn't give it to her in time. But it's only a few pages long, but it talks about the various levels of evidence that would qualify to be included in the plan. I've listed in these slides as many of the resources we know about that are currently available. So places where schools and LEAs can go to look for information. The Center on School Turnaround, which is a center that is part of the WestEd system, just recently published this document, 4 Domains for Rapid School Improvement. There's a link to that. The RAND Corporation put out a report recently on evidence-based leadership development programs. There are only 2 that met the criteria of their research review. One of those was the University of Virginia Partnership for Leaders in Education. And we've had some schools in Utah that have participated in that. So eventually we hope to have a web page here where we can put information and resources that we'll review regularly and keep updated. And as you come across good resources, if you would let us be aware of that we can then disseminate those. So targeted support and intervention. This is the second category of schools improvement under ESSA. Again, this will start in school year 2018-19, and this occurs annually. The state will run the data on schools and notify each LEA if they have any school that has one or more groups of students that is consistently underperforming on the state accountability indicators. Then it's the LEA's responsibility to make sure that the school is notified, and then the LEA will monitor those schools and assist those schools. So for example, if there are schools where their students with disabilities are not performing well, then the LEA and the school have to look at their data, determine what things maybe need to be changed or improved to support that group of students. It might be students that are acquiring English. It might be American Indian students. So looking at those various disaggregated groups of students, a school could be identified for having one or more of those student groups that are not performing well. Okay? And again, all of this occurs under the direction and supervision of the LEA. So the school would develop and implement a school improvement plan. And again, it needs to include evidence-based interventions to meet the specific needs of the students. And it would be approved and monitored at the district level. Then, as I said earlier, if these schools are a Title I school, and they remain in targeted support and intervention, you know, say for 4 years and they're not coming out, then they would be bumped up to the comprehensive and support and intervention category. So again, targeted support and improvement is all public schools. Again, it's not just Title I schools. So we know that, you know, in our state, we may have some schools that overall are achieving well and maybe aren't, you know, concerned about their performance. But if they have a specific group of children or students within their building that are not performing well, it's just, again, calling attention to those students because it's important. And our board's strategic plan is called Excellence for Each Student. And they specifically use the word each, not all or not every, but each student. And their number one imperative under that is equity. So we're trying to make sure that we meet. And so our ESSA plan is all aligned to that. Exit criteria is being worked on. And exit within a certain period of time. You can see what's currently in the draft plan. Some of those things may be subject to change. For example, right now in our draft plan, our data and statistics people have indicated they want to identify comprehensive support schools based on 2 consecutive years of data, which is the way that the state turnaround law has now changed. But they recently ran some data and they identified 4 Title I schools. 4 Title I schools does not represent the lowest performing 5% of schools. It's 5%. So I am anticipating we're going to get some pushback on some of this. So they're still running data. They're running different models. They're trying to look at data from, if we look at 2 years of data or 3 years of data, what happens if we average data? So they're working through all of those things. So what you see in the plan now, as I said, is a draft. It may change based on feedback we get from stakeholders. It may change based on feedback we get from the Department of Education when they review our plan. Kathy?
PSI school that district use out of this state?
That's a good question. When we set aside that 7%, we're only going to have about $6 million. It is not a huge amount of money. And that will be the first year when there's no hold harmless. But after that, when the hold harmless starts kicking in, that level of money is going to eventually decrease. So if we're looking at the bottom 5% of Title I schools plus some of those high schools, I am doubtful that we're going to have funding to provide to targeted support schools. It will just all depend. And we don't have all the answers to that at this point in time. We'll have to delve more into the fiscal guidance. That's a good question, Dolene. Because, yeah, if they're not a Title I school, we're not really suggesting that we make them all Title I schools, but they do get caught up in the way that they're going to be identified. Okay, 4 comprehensive schools that fail to improve. This is being worked on right now, and the board has been looking at what the consequences might be for schools in state turnaround. Then it says in the law the state may take additional action. Some states across the nation actually have state takeovers of low-performing schools or districts, or they turn district schools into charter schools or put charter schools under a high-performing charter management organization. There's a variety of things taking place across the nation. At this point, the research on it is still kind of iffy as to what actually works, what doesn't work. So some of that's being worked out, and board rule for the state turnaround is being revised to try to determine what will be the consequences for schools in turnaround. And so we'll try to align whatever that ends up being with what happens with Title I and with our Title I school improvement. So this is just kind of a summary again of all of that based on the draft, based on the ESSA law, but then also based on some of what's in our draft plan right now. Okay, school-wide and targeted assistance, which targeted assistance, Title I, again, not to be confused with targeted support, intervention, schools and school improvement. That was a little bit confusing. There is new guidance for school-wide programs, and Becky Peters did make a copy of this document for you. Okay, so you have that in there. But ESSA does incorporate the terminology of a well-rounded education. So you can see there are some of the things that a well-rounded education include. And in some cases, we have not really thought about some of those subject areas as being something that Title I schools would focus on. We've primarily focused on reading, language arts, and math. But there is a broader definition of what a well-rounded education is. So as you have time to look through that guidance, you'll get some additional information about school-wide. Targeted assistance really didn't change. So for those schools with lower than 40% poverty, again, the school identifies their students most at academic risk. Those students do not have to be students that are low-income students. They just have to be the most academically at-risk students. The school identifies those students using a variety of data sources, and then services are targeted to those specific students. Okay? Again, other things that Title I could include, and there are the citations to the actual sections of the law. Any questions about school-wide or targeted assistance? I think most of you are pretty familiar with all of that. Okay, again, the 40% poverty designation remains. We have some LEAs that are setting aside money to help support preschool programs. We encourage you to do that if you can. It's an eligible use of money. There is guidance that we can provide you for using Title I funds to support preschool programs. It could also be in secondary schools dual or concurrent enrollment classes for students. And that might include providing professional learning opportunities for teachers that are teaching those courses, including covering teachers' tuition, fees, books, and other things they might need in order to get the qualifications and training that they need to do that successfully. Okay, and again, we've talked about these things, and I think you're well aware of all of that. Again, for students in pre-K to grades 2, which there's not required testing that's used in state accountability systems for the most part, then the school would use objective criteria, other kinds of assessments that they're giving. And this is a question, this last bullet actually comes up quite frequently, and that is sometimes we get calls from parents or teachers or school personnel wanting to know if a student has a disability and they have an IEP, especially if they're in a targeted assistance Title I school, if they can then also receive those targeted Title I services. Yes. Yes, they are eligible. Okay? As well as students that are learning English. Those students are as eligible for Title I services as any other student. Okay, parent and family engagement. Cheryl Ellsworth is going to talk to us a little bit about this morning. But in NCLB, the word was involvement. Now it is engagement. What do you think? What is the difference between involving parents and engaging parents? How would you describe that? Level of motivation. Okay. Other thoughts, Kathy? Exactly. It's not just we hold a meeting and hopefully parents will come and sit there and listen. We really want to engage them in what's happening in the school, really to flesh out that partnership that we have between the school and parents and families. And again, we've already talked about the set-aside, so we won't go into that. I pointed out the fiscal requirements, and you've got that document. Maintenance of effort has changed somewhat. We went over this a little bit at one of our earlier meetings. So now, if a district doesn't meet their maintenance of effort, it has to be, they have to have also failed to maintain that effort during one or more of the 5 immediately preceding years. So the state can't just ding an LEA 1 year because they didn't meet MOE. We'd have to look back and say, okay, they didn't meet it this year, but then going back the past 5 years, oh, they've met it all of those years. Okay, so that's one of the things that changed. And there's information in that document in the guidance. Okay. Supplement, not supplant, has also changed somewhat. And so some of that remains the same, but there are parts that changed. And they tried to establish regulations on supplement, not supplant. It was very contentious. Regulations were never written. So it's just based on what actually exists in the statute. So here's something that has changed now and will have to be reflected in monitoring. So LEAs will not be required to identify individual costs or services as supplemental. Okay, they won't have to provide it through a specific method or in a particular setting to demonstrate that they're complying with that requirement. Transferability of funds, I think there are some changes there. They updated the programs from which an LEA can transfer all or a portion of funds out of. Those two programs are only Title IIA and Title IVA. So you can take any funding in those programs and transfer part of it or all of it out, and you can transfer it into any of these titles. You can never transfer money out of Title I into any other title. But if you transfer funds, you have to remember that it's also comes under the equitable services requirements. And you would have to meaningfully engage any private school officials within the boundaries of your LEA before you do that. Okay, equitable services. There are also some changes here. One of the things we have to do here at the state level is to have an ombudsman. And the superintendency nominated me for that honor. I'm not sure that I'm the person that has adequate time to do all of that. We've started having a monthly webinar with a group of people across the nation that are involved in that, so it's brand new. I'm just learning. There is a web page at the Department of Ed, but there's a lot of things there that we have to get in place. What has changed for LEAs is that the share of funds that you have to provide to any private schools that choose to participate has to be based on the total amount of Title I funds that the district receives before the district can apply any of their own allowable expenditures or transfers. Okay? So that was a change. And we'll be working with you more on this. But these equitable services now also applies to Title IC, which is migrant, Title IIA, Title IIIA, 4A, which is a new, it's going to be a competitive grant under ESSA. Jolie Honey in the Teaching and Learning Department will be supervising that. Title IV-B, which is the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. So any of those programs, if you have private school children, private schools that are located within your LEA, you have to consider all of those program funds and provide equitable services to those students and teachers in those schools if the school chooses to. Yes.
So are we their fiscal, or how does that work?
Yes, you don't ever provide funding to a private school.
Oh, okay.
You have to set aside an amount of funding that would be equitable to serve the number of children. It's kind of complicated. So there's more information in that fiscal guidance. We'll be trying to get more information out to you, but it's a much more complicated way of calculating it. I've got a PowerPoint from the Department of Education from the National Title I Association that I can also send out. So again, you have to do all this stuff during the consultation with those private school officials. And then one of the things that the ombudsman would have to do at the state level is if a private school official doesn't feel they're getting the support they need from the LEA, or if the LEA disagrees with some of the things that the private school is trying to do or have them provide, Then all of that has to be in writing, and then it would come here and have to be reviewed, and then a decision made. Kathy?
On bullet 2 there, results of consultation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want us to do
Yes, we'll have to start collecting that, so we have kind of an online repository of that information.
Would that be more than what we are already putting in this top monitor?
I don't know. We'll have to take a look at it, Paula. Like I said, it's quite complicated. And they are doing that monthly webinar. So there's been one that I've attended a few weeks ago. They'll have another one at the end of this month, and we're all still learning about it for the most part. Steve?
Include, facilities, facilities, those kind of. Because that's mainly what.
Okay, that are private.
Those are private. And we probably have those all over.
Yeah, I'm sure they're all over the
We've never
state.
included those.
No, I don't know. I've never thought of it in that way. I've thought of it as parochial schools or other kinds of, private
I have to.
private schools. I don't know. We'll have to do some more research on that, Steve. So resources and information. Again, here are some additional resources about ESSA. So the full text of the ESSA legislation, that is 391 pages long. And that's what we originally had. It's really challenging to read. If you're an attorney, you can go through and it says this section strikes this section and replaces it with this section. And after a while, you don't know what you're reading or what it's referring to. But then another one that came out is this one, which is the Elementary Secondary Education Act of 1965 as amended by in 2015. This document is 449 pages, a little bit easier to make sense of. Okay, so I encourage you, you printed this one and have it in a binder. I do. Print this one. I think it'll make more sense. Okay, the draft plans, the Council of Chief State School Officers has a wonderful webpage on ESSA with all kinds of resources that they've been posting for the past 2 years. They are a huge support to us at the state level, and I would encourage you to look at some of the resources that they've made available. And then here's our contact information. So all of us, Jeannie Rowland is the Title IIA coordinator. She resides in the Teaching and Learning Department. Cheryl Ellsworth is our State Turnaround Specialist. She's part of our team. Jolie Honey, as I said, will be leading up this Title IVA, this new academic enrichment grant. What that program is, Congress took a lot of smaller grant programs like the Javits Gifted and Talented Grant Program and some of the Safe and Drug-Free Schools, some Science Foundation grants, and they rolled it into this program. The original ask on that had been $1.6 billion per year. Congress only funded that at $400 million for federal fiscal year 17. So Utah's share of that is about $2 million. So originally it was going to go out by formula to LEAs based on the Title I formula. There's not enough money to do that. You get a couple of dollars. So it's going to be competitive. And I'm not sure when those grants will come available, but and there are specific purposes that funding can be used for. So things like providing counseling and mental health services, safety programs, prevention programs, some technology. So I'm sure Jolie will be getting information out, and we'll make sure that we relay that to you as well. I forgot to mention here, and I don't have his name here, but our wonderful Craig Kelly, who, I'm not going to do this. He's actually on annual leave. He is fully retiring at the end of this month. We have begged and pleaded with Craig every single year, please don't leave us. Please stay another year. Please, we're going to chain your feet to your desk. Don't leave us. We have to have you. But his wife finally said, you cannot work forever. And we love Craig. He has been just an incredible part of our team, and we're going to miss him tremendously. But he retired here to half-time a few years ago and has been working with us on desktop monitoring and site visits out to LEAs, helping with new Title I directors training. So he's just going to leave a big gaping hole in our section, as will Lisa. And we're really hoping that we can replace him and get a person that could help do some of the things Craig was doing and maybe take the lead on being this ombudsman person and really develop that expertise and have time to focus on that. Yes.
Rebecca, you mentioned Craig, and many of us have known him for many years, and so I want to just tie this in as we finish this section. We just heard about the downloading of 100 pages and all of that. Craig has always treated us as we're the young couple with our first mortgage. And he's the person with this pile of papers, and he said, this one means this.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Will you keep treating us that way? That's the only way we function. So we need that.
I know, I need that too. I mean, Jeff had to come up today and take care of me to get the computer running. And
He will be missed.
yeah, he's going to be terribly missed. So, yes, we will absolutely try to provide you with as much as we can. I know when I get on the U.S. Department of Ed's website, it is so hard to find information on their website. And you do a search, and it'll pull up any document from the past 100 years, and you're like, where's the document I want? And so we're going to try to put all of that on our website. We'll send it out to you because you don't have time to be spending your life looking on their website for information. Our website is currently being revised because it had to be ADA compliant, and I think the new website is going to go live July 1. So there are some things that won't be up there quite yet, but we're working really hard to get things, Becky's working really hard to get our stuff ADA compliant and get it on there. But we will certainly email you documents and send you links to things and try to keep you in the loop as much as we possibly can. We know how hard you work, and I am so grateful for the opportunity that I have to work with such incredible people in the state of Utah. It is an absolute privilege to do that, both internally with my people here as well as all of you. So that's the end of mine. We're going to move on here on the agenda. Let me just take a look. Let's have Anne Michelle come up now if she would, and we'll let her talk to you about the changes to the accountability system. For those of you that haven't met Anne Michelle, she joined our staff here at the state as part of the UMTSS team. And that original UMTSS grant is expiring, like what, in a month? Or is it
June 30th.
June 30th, that was a 5-year grant. So a lot of those people that were on that team have dispersed to districts and schools and have taken other positions. But Anne Michelle was just the perfect person to assume the role as our new accountability specialist in the accountability and assessment section. So I'm going to turn time over to her, and she can walk you through some of the changes to that new system, and you can ask her questions. And thank you, Anne Michelle, for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Does the microphone seems to be working?
Oh, goodbye.
They call this God mode, when you can hear your own voice. I'm Anne Michelle Neal. I spent 3 years in federal programs, and prior to that I was in Nebo School District as a school psychologist. taught in Seattle, Washington, and in Arizona, but it's been a privilege to work here at USBE, and it's a privilege to meet with all of you. Previously, I guess to start, our old accountability system has been based on strictly student proficiency, student growth, and high school's graduation rate. And I think that really boils what education is down to a pretty simplified model. With ESSA, we have the opportunity to introduce other indicators that show performance of schools and capture really the great things that schools are doing within the accountability system. So I'm going to go through the indicators that are mandated by ESSA and kind of describe the relationship that they have to Senate Bill 220 that was passed in the most recent legislative session. So the best metaphor I have for describing accountability indicators is that they're like buckets. We have 5 buckets that are required in accountability under ESSA, and through SB 220, folks at our office, our superintendency, worked with the Utah legislature to decide what those indicators look like for our state. Those then get written into our ESSA state plan. You have in front of you an infographic. It's purple and green that shows a nice summary of the changes in testing and what the indicators are. I'm not going to go into detail of that, but yet that's something that you can have and you can share within your LEAs. So ESSA defines 5 indicators. Again, previously we've had a large focus on achievement and growth. But now we have other things that I think are really, really critical and a really valuable opportunity to capture equity within the accountability system. So in achievement, we have proficiency, the percent of students who are proficient on end of year tests. It'll be SAGE for grades 4 through 8. And for grades 9 and 10, it's to be determined. Previously, it's been communicated that we would be using ACT Aspire, but with a strong desire to find an assessment that has strong ties to our state standards and also is predictive of ACT performance, we're looking at other assessments. So that is now to be determined in the future. ACT will be used in 11th grade. Yes. What does the future mean? It has to be decided by fall 2018 because we have, fall 2017 because we have to administer that assessment in the spring of next year. So it will be shortcoming. Fall of this year, that's what's to be determined. We're not sure yet. And I wish I had more information on that. Yes. With Aspire. She said that they're rewriting all of their high school benchmarks to align with ACT Aspire, so that change may have a lot of impact on the work that they've done in their district. Yes. It should say, I think it should say 3 through 8. That's a typo. Yes, grades 3 through 8. And that is clarified on the next slide. Yes, so SAGE will still be administered in grades 3 through 8. 9 and 10, it may end up landing on ACT Aspire, but we are revisiting that decision to make sure that it is the best assessment that we can give to 9th and 10th graders, ACT in grade 11. It's a good question. It's been shared with assessment directors. Assessment directors within LEAs are then charged with disseminating that information within the LEA. However, I understand that that doesn't always take place. For growth, we're continuing to look at student growth percentiles. We're also determining student growth targets. These student growth targets are a 3-year trajectory out for where students need to be to either maintain proficiency or reach proficiency if they're below proficient. This is where we get into the exciting part for me, is that Title III, what previously were AMAOs, have been moved into Title I accountability. So rather than you met or didn't meet your AMAOs and whatever consequences are tied to that are now part of the accountability system. So we have EL progress on the WIDA access and also EL proficiency and growth on SAGE that are included in the accountability system. We are measuring equitable opportunity. Rather than looking at the below proficient student group as we have previously, we're looking at the lowest 25% of students by school. So that lowest 25% of students will be looked at specifically in their growth and the percent of those students who are meeting their SGP. Post-secondary readiness is expanding beyond just graduation rate to include ACT composite score of 18, advanced coursework, that's participation in AP courses, concurrent enrollment, or completing CTE pathways or other kinds of IB programs, and then including graduation rate as part of that also. Yes, sure. Mm-hmm. Two really good questions. First one is what happens in the fall, in the coming fall. This coming fall, the current accountability system will be in place. This new accountability system is slated for the fall of 2018. And does the infographic say something different? And so what you can expect for this coming fall is the accountability system that we've had, that we've been using for the past several years. With one exception, that school grades are, it's unlikely that school grades will be assigned this fall. Yeah, let me go ahead and clarify. No, please ask. Exactly. So well, okay. Mm-hmm. So accountability this fall is based on the assessments that were just administered. That's why we're staying with the same accountability system for the same accountability calculations for this coming fall. Right. Right. Does that clarify your question? And then your second question. The percentage of Utah high school students who are above 18, I believe, I know, but I can't, it's high. It's like 74% of students. But with ACT having been an elective assessment, you have a population of students who are likely college bound. We have an above average ACT average score than the nation. We expect that when we require all students to take the assessment, the average score for the state will go down. 18 was decided upon as the cut score for being proficient on ACT or reaching that benchmark, because that is a score where students are likely to be admitted into a university within the state. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes. Yes, that's true. There is an RFP for the vendor who does SAGE. Are we possibly looking at a new assessment? Yes and no. Part of what is included in the RFP and in the contract will be the transfer of all the items that we've developed for SAGE over to the new assessment. So what we expect is that it could potentially have a different name, but we want all of the items that we've written to move over. So the assessment itself the interface might look different, but the content will remain the same. Does that help? It's also our intention in assessment to keep the high school assessments, the high school SAGE content assessments in biology and chemistry, the interims, the benchmarks, and the summative assessments available for LEAs to use if they choose to do so. If another assessment is selected for the 9th and 10th and 11th grade assessment to be included in the accountability system. Yes. Okay, sure. From 8th grade to 9th grade. The question is, if 8th graders are taking SAGE and 9th graders are taking another assessment, which may be something like ACT Aspire, how do you measure growth from 8th to 9th grade? And that's a really great question, and I don't have an answer currently. It will depend on that assessment, the relationship we can show in something like a bridge study. If a relationship can be demonstrated from that 8th grade assessment to the 9th grade assessment, it will have to wait. That's part of one of the reasons why in 2018, in the fall of 2018, school grades likely will not be assigned because of all the changes to assessment. It's going to be really difficult to calculate growth. And in all the ways that growth is included in this accountability system, it will be hard to determine those growth percentages. Any other questions on the indicators? Mm-hmm. Individual student. So the percentage of students, the question was, what is EL proficiency based on? And it's based on the percentage of students meeting their student growth percentile. What was that? For SAGE. So the EL indicator, the EL progress indicator, includes both their progress on the WIDA access, those students who are making adequate progress towards acquiring English and also reaching proficiency, and then looks at their progress on the SAGE assessment, so their academic performance, because both of those things are important when you're looking at the success of an EL student. So there are additional reported indicators. ESSA requires that states have a reporting system, such as school grades in place. It gives us a really good opportunity to not have a state system and a federal system anymore. We now will have one cohesive accountability system. The reported indicators show early literacy. Because SAGE isn't administered in K-1-2, we're looking at the percent of students reading on grade level in elementary schools. For high schools, we were looking at AP exam performance. So not just in the indicator piece, we're looking at students who earn a C or better in their coursework, but we will report on school report cards the number of students who are passing the AP exam. And also reporting many or all of the indicators from the previous slide by subgroups or by student groups. There's also a really interesting school quality indicator. The way that Utah has selected to report this indicator is that LEAs will select from a list of appropriate indicators that they would like to report on. So the board will approve a list of things that are indicators of school quality, and the LEAs can choose one and up to two of those that they'd like to report. So these might be things like school climate surveys. They might be intervention fidelity data. They might be chronic absenteeism rates, improvements year over year. So those are examples of the things that will be proposed to the board, and there will be a list from which LEAs can choose from to report on. So the breakdown is that you get an overall rating based on, so for elementary schools, or I guess they're not elementary schools, they're non-high schools, elementaries and junior highs. You have an overall rating based on achievement, growth, and that equitable opportunity. Equitable education opportunity includes those indicators of EL growth and the growth of the lowest 25%. The breakdown of points, you can see that the majority of points are based on academic proficiency and achievement, or academic growth and achievement. That is required by ESSA, that the bulk of an accountability system needs to be based on academic achievement and growth. Then the growth of the lowest 25% is 17% and then 9%. If you have less than 10 English learners, those points are redistributed, and that appears in the smaller graph. So for high schools, it's very similar, but you add the post-secondary readiness piece with ACT or advanced coursework participation, graduation rate, and ACT composite of 18, graduation rate, and the participation in advanced coursework. And there's the breakdown of points for the overall rating for high schools. And again, if you have less than 10 English learners, the redistribution of how those points comprise the whole. Any questions here? It is in the readiness courses. Let's see, graduation, ACT, 18 points. No, it's the number who get a C or better. So it's the number of students who are participating in advanced courses earning a C or better, not on the exam score. The exam score is one of those additional reported indicators, the average AP exam score, not a factor in the calculation of points for accountability. Does that clarify? Okay. No, it counts. We talked a lot about AP. It count those. That's a reported item. Post-secondary readiness or advanced coursework participation includes AP, concurrent enrollment, IB, or also CTE completers. Is that helpful? So we're capturing a lot more of what schools do than just academic achievement and academic growth. To me, it's a much more all-encompassing system that holds schools accountable for things like EL progress and for what students and how many students are participating and have access to advanced coursework. Aligns really well with the board's strategic plan that focuses so much on equity. School grades, we want to, ESSA requires that there is a school rating system. The legislature feels strongly about school grades. So with an A, B, C, D, and F, we wanted to attach descriptors to those so that there isn't so much focus on just the letter. There's certain things that I like something like a Yelp rating system, 3 out of 5 stars. I can stay in a 3-star hotel just fine. It carries a different sort of message, but this is the rating system that the legislature felt very strongly about. A is an exemplary school, B a commendable school, C is a typical school. So it's not intended to be a normative comparison, but the bulk of schools will likely fall in this C, B, and D range. And F schools represents a school that is a critical needs school. So we're trying to emphasize these kinds of descriptors along with the letter grade. Currently, we're having a design challenge that will launch in August for the new school report cards so that they display data in a way that's understandable by parents, community members, in a way that's engaging and interesting, that conveys all of the complexity of this information. And that design challenge is going to, I think, be really successful. Florida has come up with, or I guess ran a similar design challenge and ended up with really, really excellent school report cards. So we're hoping for the same for the state of Utah. If that's something that you have high school students or college students in design programs or design courses that you'd like them to participate in, that will launch in August and close in October. So the rest of my slides are related to assessment changes, not to ESSA, so we don't need to go there unless Becky wants me to. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Jill, for being here today. And now we have Natalie Grange, who will come up and join us. Natalie is the Assistant Superintendent for Financial Operations here at the Utah State Board of Education. And she's going to share with you a little bit of information about some changes that will eventually be occurring with the finance system. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for having me, and hello to everyone online. We're not supposed to stand in front of these, but it's kind of the middle of the room. So generally the people online just see the back of our heads. So maybe I'll just stand up here against the wall. I didn't bring any slides today. We're in the process of working through a lot of really exciting things. And sometimes when we put those out there, people think they're final, right? And so something once up on the web lives forever in infamy, right? So I didn't bring a lot of slides. I wanted to talk through a little bit some of the transitions that we're making here at the Board of Education pertaining to our financial operations side. And I wanted to kind of piggyback on some of the ESSA conversation that you just had. One of the other core elements of ESSA is something that pertains to school level reporting. There's a lot of assessment measures and accountability measures, but there's also a school level report that's required as part of ESSA. We're just in the beginning phases of having work groups with the financial business administrators and financial individuals within your districts to talk about what that would look like. But largely the main purpose or point of a school level report is to tie resources to outcomes, right? So we spend a lot of time talking about outcomes, assessment, accountabilities, but we don't necessarily always tie the resources into those. And that's sort of the report or the point of this school level report. Initially and in the first years, obviously, we're trying to harness the financial information that we already have from your LEAs. depending upon how each of your LEAs does business, you all have different processes. You all have different ways that you account for things. I think even amongst our LEAs, we have different ways that FTEs are allocated. I know in some of our LEAs, especially in some of our federal programs, some of the personnel are housed at the district office and then work in this section or work out in the schools. Some are actually housed at schools. So there's a lot of things that we have to work through in order to get to school level reporting. One of the great things, and I won't get too techie on you because that's really the slide presentation I have is for the business administrators. And there's all sorts of funds and accounts and object codes, and nobody wants to talk about that. So there's one of the built-in structures in the chart of accounts is called a location code. Every LEA, every individual school has a unique location code. It's kind of like, I don't want to say a social security number because that will get me in trouble, but it's a unique identifier for each school. And what we're trying to work with the business administrators on is how to code accounting or expenditures to that location code. Why do I bring that up with you? Because largely, as you're in charge of your federal programs, as you're in charge of approving expenditures, making sure that those codes are being flagged inappropriately really becomes your responsibility, right? The first person that sees a transaction, whether that's you or your accounting staff, or whether it's a school secretary that you work with or someone in the business office, really it becomes everybody's responsibility to make sure that those codes are appropriate. We have a consistent chart of accounts that is to be used statewide. You all are familiar with expenditure codes, object codes. We are adding one more to your tray this year. If you're not already using it or your LEA isn't already using it, look for those location codes. They've been established for years. They're part of the Cactus system. It's what we use to, I believe, assessments. Where did you go? Did she leave? I believe that that location code is already being used in school level reporting. As part of that, we have to come up with a financial statement, if you will, or a school level expenditures report for each school. We have a lot of really great ideas, right? The good idea fairies are abounding these days. We have a lot of really great ideas, but we haven't quite settled on something exactly. The plan right now is that anything that's coded to a location code, specifically, I think the largest types of expenditures we're going to see at the school level are, of course, going to be personnel, right? Teachers, FTEs, that's obviously what we're going to see. But we should also be seeing supplies, equipment, the things that you use on a day-to-day basis. We get into some tricky situations and things that you aren't particularly in charge of, but school lunch. So some school lunch, some kitchens cook from scratch and have expenditures and get deliveries right at the location level. Others don't. Some of your LEAs have a central kitchen. And so we're trying to work through how we're going to code those expenditures. There's a fine trade-off between getting good data and the cost it takes to get good data, right? If we have to hire 52 accountants to code out every ounce of flour, that's probably not a good idea, right? The same thing works with pupil transportation. The same bus picks up kids at the high school, the middle school, and the elementary school every day, and it's on the same tank of gas. So do we really expect people to allocate costs down to that level? No, we would never get anything done, right? We're trying to come up with reasonable allocation methodologies. And so I bring this up because as you look at your operation and you look at how you're funded and you look at where your expenditures are being coded, largely you're all the ESSA directors, right? Title I directors, that's who I thought I was talking to. As you're looking at how your expenditures are coded, the district will probably or maybe be having some conversations with you about who of your employees or even of yourself, how much of your activities are centered at the school level, and maybe be asking you to start coding your time that way. So just remember, it's a good thing, right? Because we have the ability to start tying resources to outcomes. And most people think that that's a good idea. It's actually been pretty beneficial as we started looking through what other states have been doing. There's a huge work group of all other departments of educations. And we've been having lots of conversations about how to accomplish this without killing everyone off, because we have to make sure that we can use the structure that we have in place, that we can use the data that we're already gathering, that we don't require every school district to hire a whole herd of accountants just to code things, right? We're trying to figure out a good way to harness that. And so if you think of good ideas, as you're the ones that are most familiar with your programs, you're the most familiar with where your resources are going, have those conversations with your business administrators. I can guarantee that they will probably come and start asking you questions. How we allocate those things at the federal level is very important, especially as we start coming up with an amount per school. The objective of these reports is to come up with an amount that's being spent per student. And one of our main objectives, because as you all know, each school is unique. everyone has different indicators. Everyone has different populations. You have different socioeconomic situations in each of your individual schools. Even within a district, we may have one school that gets a significant amount of Title I money and other schools that don't. And so you're going to see different per pupil amounts at those schools based on those indicators, right? And we want to make sure as we develop that report that we find ways to present that information so those per pupil amounts aren't misconstrued, right? Anything that we put out there, if we don't also tag along various other indicators, is going to look like one school is getting more money than another for whatever reason. Does that make sense? So think through that as well. If you have good ideas or if you have some suggestions as you've been working with colleagues in other districts or maybe other states, if you get some intel or something that you think would be great for us to know, please pass that along to our staff. We are willing and able and happy to receive all those comments. We're having work groups right now on the school level reporting. I believe the next one, it was supposed to be next week. We're going to move it to the 26th. Those are public meetings. They're also they're advertised, and anyone is available to attend or welcome to attend. We're recording those and publishing them online. They are pretty techy, but if you're really excited about accounting and want to learn more about how we're coding stuff, as we get into the allocation discussions, I think that will be really important. So just keep that in mind. That's something else that's coming downstream. We have to actually report on the fiscal year 2018, which of course begins in 12 days now. So we don't have to make this report to the government until 2018. And there's also a state law, it came out in House Bill 331 2 years ago, that requires us to make a recommendation as to school level reporting. Instead of having two systems, and we all know two systems is no good, right? Instead of having two systems, we're going to come up with one report. And we're going to figure out a way, we're working with our IT and data staff to figure out a way to potentially link that to the accountability school level report cards so that the public can see an entire picture of an LEA or of school together instead of having to go to numerous places. So these are all, again, just conceptual things that we're working through. We have until next December to figure them out. So look for questions. We may have surveys or things going out to get your feedback. Are there any questions or comments? Okay. All I have is this postie, so when I get done. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the UCA. Hey, we are replacing the UCA. And if I was able to bring you screenshots, if you're really excited about it, like I am, come up to my office after this meeting. I taped up on the board, or I taped up on the wall, and it took an entire wall, the workflow with the vendor that we're working with. I'm really excited about this new system. We're putting together a grants management system that will be just as useful for you as it is for me. And right now, the UCA is not helpful to me, so I'm not sure how helpful it is to you. One of the great things about this new system is that it's very user-friendly. You'll be able to navigate through it. We're trying to, we're not trying. We are combining the assurances that you get from all of the sections within this building. I know largely you probably just get those from the Title I area, but if this was a group of business administrators, I think they answer the same questions like 5 times. And so we're trying to consolidate all of those into one area. This system is internet-based, kind of like the UCA is. You'll be able to go in, and at any given time, it has dashboards, and it tells you where all of your applications are. It tells you where your reimbursement requests are. We've tried to work through the workflows so that it will be much more user-friendly. The back button works. Like, maybe I'm the only one that really cares about that, but I feel really strongly about that because it makes me want to punch kittens on a daily basis. So the UCA is great, and it does exactly what we asked it to do. But as we're transitioning into a more complicated funding structure and having to be able to tie outcomes to resources, this system will be an amazing way to harness that. Something that I saw yesterday, and seriously, I held it all in until I got back to the office and then had a little emotional breakdown. For each of the grants, we have the ability to tie what are called KPIs, or key program indicators. These are all things that you're talking about as you're looking towards accountability. We're looking towards linking our funding sources to the board strategic plan and to the strategic plans that you have at your LEAs. We're trying to tie outcomes or indicator points to funding, and we will have the ability, our staff will, working in conjunction with you, of course, as we develop new applications moving forward, to put those indicators in. The good thing about that is you won't have to send them to us on spreadsheets. You won't have to email them to us. You won't have to fill out SurveyMonkeys. We have the ability to collect data and financial information in the system, and to collect that in such a way that my staff or Becky's staff or Sandy, I know Sandy spends oodles of her time typing things that people send her, creating massive summary spreadsheets. We won't have to do that anymore. Those assurances that we send out to all of you, I don't know how many of you fill those out. But you print those out, you fill in the little bubbles, you scan it and send it back. Sarah Moore spent months typing all those into a spreadsheet so that we could monitor them. I don't know about you, but we have lots better things to do. This system will enable us to do that. It will actually be a real-time link to our state accounting system, which is fantastic for me because right now we have to reconcile 3 systems on a monthly basis. That's why it takes us so long. I know that we get constant concerns expressed to us from the business administrators about how long it takes to process a reimbursement. Just so you know, right now, when you put a reimbursement request into the UCA, it has to go through all the approvals in the UCA. Our sections have individual approvals. Then we put it into BASE, which is our accounting system, which has levels of approvals. Then we print it out and have to sign it off in order to have documentation for our auditors. And then it finally goes up to state finance for payment. That's why things take so long, is because we're running them through 3 systems. This system will actually have all the approval levels in the grants management side. Once the approvals are done, it goes directly to the accounting system. So we're hoping to cut out some of that in between this. We won't have to be reconciling things manually. It's a lot of great things for us. Maybe you won't see as much of the benefit, but we do believe that we'll be able to process reimbursement requests faster. We're actually working towards trying to make federal payments twice a month, which would be really amazing. There's lots of things that we are working towards. We're also here at the State Board of Education changing our entire accounting system in 12 days. So I don't know if any of you have lived through that, but let's change our accounting system, develop a new grants management system, and all sorts of other things in the same year. We have a lot of really great things coming on, and I believe in the next year or so, you're going to see the benefits of those. You're going to be able to use the data and dashboards that you're collecting. All the information that you're having to report to us will be available to you. And at your individual LEA level, you'll be able to harness that information. We will have dashboards for your business administrators, so they will be able to see the things that you see. They'll be able to help or participate in budget creation, so we don't have to keep going back and forth so much. There'll be a lot more transparency. In conjunction with that, one of the things that we're working on, I know you usually have this meeting and get your preliminary allocations. I hate to disappoint you today, but those aren't done. We're working towards trying to get those completed. That's something that financial operations does in conjunction with the Title I staff or the title staff. With some of the new formulas that have come out with ESSA and some of our personnel and system transitions were a little bit behind this year. We haven't rolled the UCA yet. We're hoping to get that up and running in the next couple of weeks and hoping to get those calculations out to you as soon as possible. We're moving towards having those calculations done in a system called MSPA. It's another system that we're developing in-house that actually will show everyone how we do your allocation. Right now, they live on spreadsheets, right? And we can't really email them out because they're linked to 15 other spreadsheets, so we'd have to send you all 15, and then by the time you got them, the links break. So largely what we do is send those out, especially to the business administrators, in PDF format. I don't know if you've ever tried to recalculate an Excel spreadsheet in a PDF. It doesn't work. You can't see the formulas. So this system will be really great for transparency. You'll be able to see what we're using. You'll be able to know as we're making changes and transitions when those things happen. The grants management system, what we're talking about, it has an interactive email feature where you'll be able to chat. So if Sandy has a question and you happen to be online, you guys can chat. If she needs documentation from you and she's doing a monitoring, you can upload it right that second. We're having some conversations about potentially having you upload general ledgers when you submit a reimbursement request so that we can do desk monitoring before payments are stopped for monitoring. We're trying to make a lot of really good improvements to our processes to get things done more quickly for you and to kind of standardize what we're doing so your day-to-day operations aren't impacted by the monitoring and documentation that we have to complete for federal programs. Just for timing and information purposes, UCA will be in effect for next year. We don't have the new grants management system up and running yet. I've been promised that it will be operational like the Death Star on July 1st, 2018. I really hope that that's true. If by some miracle we get it up and running and our federal programs are in phase 1 of transition, the programming that we're doing right now with the programmers, we're actually going to put the current year grants in there so that it's running parallel with UCA so that we can test it. We can see that it's working. I was sat through with a week, this whole entire week, I've sat with the vendors going through the process flows. After they showed it to me once, I honestly don't even really think training is going to be that difficult because it's very intuitive. Anytime you have to do something, you hover over a bubble and it tells you what to do. Amazing. So it seemed very user-friendly to me. We've worked in some training and one commitment that we will make to you, that we will not shut down an old system and start up a new system without you having sufficient time to be trained. So that's one of the reasons that we're keeping UCA up and running this year. as we didn't think it would be a good idea on anyone's side to shut something old down without any training on the new side. But I believe that it will be very easy. It's a very updated platform, if you will, kind of like getting into your bank account, and maybe you don't like that either, but it's pretty simple to navigate through. Yes. 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 So we're working on automating all of those functions. It's going to be a phase-in process. No. No. So for all of the minimum school program funds that flowed through to you, they will still be flow through. That won't be a change. But you'll be able to see them real time, and you'll be able to see where they are. And when we make changes to them, you'll be able to see the changes. Right now, you can only see changes in the budgets. You can't really see why. One of the cool things about it is when we send out a change, we can actually push out. We're going to be automating award letters, which will be nice because then those award letters will actually live in the system. You don't even have to print them out. They'll just be right there. If you have questions, there's lots of places where we can put any special instructions, specific guidelines. A lot of the things that I think right now our staff are having to push out by email, or the things that your auditors ask for and you lose all the time and have to keep getting from your business administrators. The system will be a complete record of everything for us, and I think for you. You won't have to keep those hard copies anymore. The other really great thing, and I haven't even talked to our staff about it because I just saw it yesterday. There's a whole monitoring module, which will enable our staff to be able to track their monitoring activities in the system. Depending upon what permissions we allow or don't allow, they'll be able to push requests to you real time. You'll have there's a dashboard on the front that actually has I don't want to call it like a countdown clock, but like a reminders tab, right? When you log in, it goes, hey, nice person, these things are overdue, blink, 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 right? So instead of our staff having to call you or email you or remind you all the time, they call it auto nagging. I think that's kind of funny, but the system will auto nag you. Every time you log in, it'll say, hey, did you know you haven't filed a reimbursement request for 18 months? Hey, one of our main motivations is we really need our LEAs to start sending reimbursement requests in more timely. We have LEAs who only send one reimbursement request in ever for grants. Is that fair? And then that puts a substantial amount of monitoring burden on Sandy because instead of monitoring small things, she has to monitor everything you've done. So we're really pushing and trying, especially with the new system, to get you to work with your business administrators to get your reimbursement requests in more frequently. And in doing so, we're hoping to give you a platform to make that easier so that it doesn't take as much time and effort as it currently does. I think it's going to be great. The vendor that we're working with is super fantastic, and they were like more excited than I was. So there were lots of squeals yesterday. There were some tears. They were all happy tears. So I think we're in really good shape. I just wanted to let you know, or just keep in mind that, again, as we transition systems, I know that's never easy. Change is hard. Change is difficult. But I think in this circumstance, it's a really good change. And it's one that we've needed to make for a while. And I think that it will make all of our lives easier. And, there's still going to be some challenges, obviously. But we'll be able to reduce a lot of the interaction that we have to have via email. I don't know about you guys, but my email box is like my worst enemy. Like when I'm on vacation or when I'm out of the office for 3 days, I have like significant like PTSD about having to open my email. Like it just terrifies me. And so having a system that can kind of help us manage that we won't have to have as many reminders, or the reminders that we get are important ones that you need to look at and categorize. Those are really the big things that we have going on. Do you have any questions? So the question for everyone online is, are we going to do one last UCA training? It sounds to me like I need to do one last UCA training. Okay. Okay, so the question was, are you going to have one last UCA training? And I believe the answer is yes, because it sounds like we need one. So for those who are new this year, and that makes sense because you all have new people coming in and out, we'll figure out how to get one of those online soon. Would like August be soon enough? Okay. If you have someone in your LEA who wants UCA training, could you please send that information to Sandy? And Sandy will communicate that to us, and we'll figure something out. We'll get something on the schedule. Are there any other questions? For this upcoming year? So the question was, when are we going to have grant allocations in the UCA for 18? We're hoping to have them finished by the end of this week. So we are trying to push through all of the award letters, and I think the updated award letters for 17. Not this week. This is Friday, right? Next week. Sorry, it's Friday. It's Friday. We're hoping to get it done. Like, we usually roll the UCA a little bit before now. We're hoping to get the UCA rolled on July 1st. For those of you who don't know, Sarah Moore isn't with us anymore, and we don't really have a full-time person functioning or responsible day-to-day just for the UCA. That's been spread across some of the accountants and staff upstairs. And so we're trying to kind of duct tape things together until we can get that taken care of. We're going to not make some of the timing mistakes that we made last year. For those of you who had issues with the indirect cost loads, we're not going to do that this year because we know now what the issues are. So we're trying to make sure all the indirect costs get loaded first. We haven't pushed through all of the award letters for the 17 reallocation. Is that correct? I know the reallocation's done and it is getting loaded in the UCA today, I think, or yesterday. And then award letters are going out, I think, sometime this week. So we got the notification for reallocation from the feds later than we usually do, I think is fair. And then just with personnel changes, we haven't had time to put those through. So we're trying as quickly as we can to get it rolled out. We're working on a little bit of a contingency plan with Title I to keep those up and running, but that's a great question. So any other questions, concerns? That's about all I have. Thanks for your patience. We really appreciate any ideas you may have, so please flow those through to us. So we can't solve problems we don't know we have. So if we have a problem we don't know about, please let us know so we can fix it. I guess that's my last plea is if something's going wrong, please don't wait until you're so mad you want to punch me. Like, please call us and let us know so we can solve it. I know everyone feels like we're all busy and we can't take care of things, but if there's really an issue, we want to solve it before you get just so angry that the hate mail starts. So please let us know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're grateful for Natalie for coming down and spending a few minutes because, as she said, she's been in meetings with that new vendor all week long and trying to get this whole new thing going. We're going to take a break. Let's come back at 10 to 11, and we'll start with Cheryl at that point in time talking about parent engagement.
Hello, I'm going to go ahead and start. So I'm going to go ahead and start with introducing myself. My name is Cheryl Ellsworth, and for Dr. Donaldson was talking about Senate Bill 234, which is the turnaround bill, and I oversee that bill. I am a former school teacher that started teaching in Philadelphia, then Prince George's County, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. And then I was part of a turnaround school in Washington, D.C. with one of the lowest performing, it was the lowest performing elementary school in the district. We were number 71 of 72, so there was one school that we were better than. And so we made significant changes. I learned a lot about what it means to turn around a school. I learned a lot about sustainable changes and what it takes to sustainably change a school. But the greatest thing I probably learned is that without families, we can't do it. And so when we were looking at basically the consultants that are working with our turnaround schools, when we were looking at their models of turnaround, none of them involved or even had a component of family engagement, which if you think about it, like how are we really going to change these schools if families are not involved? Sorry. And so we looked at a couple of models. These were models that I've actually done at the school that I came from. So I've lived and breathed these models of forms of parent engagement initiatives. So when we talk about parent engagement, I want to talk about first what that actually really means. And Dr. Donaldson kind of talked about this a little bit. And we're going to look at a couple of initiatives that we're starting or have started here in Utah. Okay, so as we know, first, there is that shift in terminology. We are going from parent involvement to parent engagement. This is a framework from the U.S. Department of Education. And family engagement, when you're trying to figure out, like, what does it mean? We realize there are three main components. One, it needs to be relational. Two, it builds the capacity of your parents and your teachers. And three, it's linked to learning. And that last piece is the part that usually takes the most work, but it's the part that can give us the greatest impact for student success. And so if you look at this whole case right here of things that are on the lower impact side, you can see those are things that are maybe just like one time. Those are things that are not building relationships. Those are things that are probably one more thing for the school to do. And I'm not saying that we want to take away those things, because we need celebrations, we need fundraisers, we need potlucks, we need all of those things. But if you are thinking about putting more things on a school, you might look at a list and say, what kind of things can we take off? Because if we're putting more on, there's definitely some things that do need to go away so that the teachers at that school can continue to do the work that they were hired to do. And so things on the higher impact, regular personalized communication, positive phone calls home, classroom observations, parent help on learning projects, home visits, goal setting, modeling and learning support strategies. So these are the things that we're trying to go for. Two, parents and teachers are teams. This is something that is a little bit of a mind shift for a lot of people. Honestly, for a lot of parents, that they equally are part of this whole learning experience. And so this is information that we received from WestEd. If we look at, based on 6 hours of instruction, 180 days per year, and 8 hours of sleep every day, kids are actually only at school 12% of the time. I know families think that it's more. They are not. And so with that little time that we have them, we need to utilize that time and utilize it wisely. And so there's a time crunch that we have here. When we're thinking about engaging families, it's not just because, it's because we are not with the students as much as families think. They are their kids' first teachers. Whether those are things that maybe are positive or not so positive, that's where they're learning things first from their families. So here are 2 initiatives that we're going to talk about that are going on currently in the state. Home visits and academic parent-teacher teams. For short, we say APTT. A lot of people are like APPPPT, but it's academic parent-teacher teams, or APTT. So home visits. We know that home visits do the following things. They reduce absenteeism. There are fewer suspensions and expulsions. Improved communication between home and school, shared accountability, and improved test scores. This is something personally that my turnaround school definitely needed. We needed all of these things for my school to make the growth that it needed to make. I already told you that we were the bottom elementary school in the District of Columbia. And so we, at that first year that I was at the school, there were 212 suspensions. Kids were proficient in both math and reading at 8%. So that's about 2 kids per grade passing the test, the state test or district test. So when we were looking at what we could do to better our school, we were hoping that this data would support our school as well. And so this is a research based out of Johns Hopkins University. If you're someone who's like, show me the data, I'm not going to do things unless it's like data driven. In 2015, the parent-teacher home visit project model of home visits makes significant impact on student outcomes. Here were 2 key findings. 1, students had 24% fewer absences than similar students whose families did not receive a visit. And 2, the same students were likely to read at or above grade level compared to similar students who did not receive a home visit. These 4 pictures are our teachers. Well, one's me when I was a teacher, but the other 3 are teachers here in the state that are doing these visits. This is currently going on. It's not just for teachers in Washington, D.C., right? It's happening nationwide. And so home visits, we know, are not new. So when I talk about home visits under this model, this is what I mean. 1, the visits last 30 minutes and are voluntary for everyone. This is really important. When I go around and train teachers and they're like, I don't know if I can do this, I tell them, you know what? You don't actually have to. It's voluntary for you and for families. So teachers are calling ahead of time and they're saying, can we come in and spend some time with you and get to know you and talk about hopes and dreams for your child? And so when it's voluntary on both sides, it's a much, much better experience. 2, the educators are trained and compensated. So I know money, everyone's like, tell me the money. Just tell me how much does this cost? So for a training that we do, that costs $300. And the reason why it costs $300 is I bring a parent and a teacher with me to train your teachers on this model. And what's really helpful is, 1, that teacher, her leadership or his leadership capacity is being built as they're also sharing the best practices that they've been doing. And 2, it's really powerful for a group of teachers to hear the stories from a parent who's received the visit. So it's not just me and I'm just like, hi, I'm this random person coming to tell you about home visits and how awesome it is. It's like, here's a person from your state who's done the visit and received it. Talking about compensation. So a lot of the schools have generally planned in their budget to compensate teachers $30 per visit. So if you think about it, that's 2 teachers going, so that's actually $60. And what they're telling teachers though is that they're giving them about $25, so that can kind of take care of the benefits and taxes. So they're budgeting for $30. Educators go out in pairs. So I guess you didn't know that before, but they do. So they're not going by themselves. And this is also a really important piece. We're not saying 3 or 4 people. That also can really be a lot for families. The only time generally if there's a 3rd person, it might be a translator, but we generally try to even make that person who's translating the other person. All students are visited, meaning a cross section of students. If we target students, families will begin to talk. they'll say like, oh, they're only visiting these kind of kids or these kind of kids. So it's all a cross section of students. And finally, the visits focus on shared vision and values for students of success of students. So like I told you at the end of the visit, we're talking about hopes and dreams. What do you want for your child? Okay, so I just wanted to show you just like a 3-minute video for those who are more visual learners of what this looks like.
We all want the best for our children. And as parents, we can't do it on our own. We need the help from the other side, the educator side.
When you have a strong school climate, when you have dynamic, strong leadership, when you have professional capacity around faculty, they're getting the professional development they need, your school will begin to thrive. But if you leave out the component of family engagement, you're only going to get so far.
Whether you're in first grade or you're a graduating senior, it's important for families and for administrators and for teachers to have relationships.
You might realize all these things about parents that you didn't know before. And so it helps you to realize that, oh, like people do care. It's just that we're all doing the best with what we've been given.
The Parent Teacher Home Visit Project started back in '96 with focus groups because there is an issue with communication. Parents didn't know what was happening at the school. As teachers began to step outside of the classroom, things began to change back in the classroom.
It's totally voluntary, so it's really for teachers who want to participate.
We understand that bridging the gap between home and school is vitally important to the student's success, and so we make it a priority.
As a parent, I like the way they do the home visits because they don't just push it on you. They ask you, make sure you're comfortable with it.
You go with another partner teacher, which is also a key part of the program. Teachers are compensated, both the teacher that makes the phone call and the teacher that comes along as the partner. The visit at Christine's home just went great. I felt that her mom and her family could see that I really cared about her as a person, not just a student.
Tụi này khu tua bé chế mà tôi khó thì nữ tua còn nữ bao bé chế trong cha khó cô thì có bé bao nữ thì bé thì liệu tao không đi rồi.
They can be friends and also they can talk whenever they want to.
I notice a huge difference in the student. As soon as you've been in their home, you've seen what their family life is like, their environment. They know that you really do want to get to know them for who they are beyond just in your classroom. And all of a sudden you see this shift in the child where they really feel connected to you.
We bring the transcript and we show to the parents about that this student is ready to graduate and yes, they can go to college and we tell them the deadlines when they can apply for college. We give them information about financial aid and scholarships.
What I liked about when they came here to visit is that I know that we could open up and tell them how we actually feel or how they could tell me what I'm doing good and what I'm doing bad at in school. And it makes me feel like they actually care, and they do.
I have other kids that went to school, but none of them ever had a home visit like this. So I think it's great. And, it shows me that the school is actually doing a lot more for the kids.
Okay, so relating to Utah, where we are in our Utah story of the home visit project. So in 2016, 23 out of the 26 schools in cohort 1 of State Turnaround decided they wanted to participate in the home visits. When Superintendent Smith hired me, he said, you know what, let's go ahead and just start with the turnaround schools, right? There's some money to support this. Let's go ahead and do it that way. That's why it started in the turnaround schools. This is not just for schools that are in the bottom 3% of schools in the state, right? And so 770 teachers were compensated in this model. and 4,600 visits in this past year have visited, or students have been visited under this model. So this is happening from San Juan District all the way to Ogden. And so why this is so exciting is that I'm starting to hear the stories, right? I'm starting to hear the impact that it's making on families and what this is actually doing for schools. I'm not saying this is like a magic bullet. We all know that school improvement, there isn't a magic bullet. But if you're looking at your school and you're thinking like, we are missing this component, this is a really good thing to potentially look at. I know that we have people from San Juan, we have people from Canyons that are participating in this now. And so this may be something that you can even ask them how it's going in their schools and what kind of support they're doing. Granite has a lot of schools that are participating in this and will continue to do this next year as well. So we have all of you in here right now for that. In 2017, 4 new schools have already been trained, 3 in the Salt Lake District and Gateway Preparatory down in Enoch, Utah. And so what's really exciting about that as well is that it's not just for like urban settings as well, right? We have rural settings, we have all kinds of settings that are taking this initiative and trying it. And so for any of you who are like, I want to see what this training looks like before I'm thinking like, oh, I don't know if this is something we want to do. Here's some trainings coming up. From Granite District to Jordan District to Salt Lake District to San Juan District, right? So we have trainings that you can sit in. The training is about 2.5 hours, and it really helps teachers to walk through those kind of things that you want to talk about with families and making the phone call and what it looks like to really engage families and having a conversation about culture, having a conversation about not making assumptions and talking about the barriers that might keep people from wanting to do this or trying that. So these are potential trainings that you all can come to as well. So this is what people in the state are saying about home visits. A teacher at Bluff Elementary School in San Juan District said, "The visits have been so valuable. It has helped me to dispel some misconceptions about the students, parents, or home life. So far in my visits, I have learned these students are loved, encouraged to go to college or have older siblings in college, and more about what they do outside of school. What a valuable program this has been." And this is, I've talked to this teacher one-on-one, and she is a teacher that drives into the community to teach mainly children on the reservation. And for her, she's like, Cheryl, I needed to go to their homes. I needed to see, because I had all these ideas and I was wrong. And I wanted to dispel those misconceptions. And I found out that the families do love their kids. A lot of them are gone all week to work somewhere else and come back on the weekends. That's why I didn't see them at school. But they do care about their kids. And that's the kind of things that we want to talk about. Yes. I'm going to hand you the microphone so people can hear.
I'm not part of the program, but I started teaching in 2002 and have taught until this year coming up. And every year, I visited every single one of my students in their home before school starts. So it took me 2 weeks, and each visit was 30 to 45 minutes. And so I planned what I thought my curriculum was going to be, but then I made my visits to my kids, and I changed what I was going to teach and how I was going to teach it, because it helped me to know exactly what they needed. The awesome thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is I hardly have any behavior problems in my classrooms, because the parents know what my expectations are, the kids know what my expectations are, the kids have listened to me tell their parents what my expectations are, and the other thing that's awesome is the parents know how much I love their kids. And the kids are not nervous to start school. So I've taught 3rd, 1st, 6th, and 5th, and I even went to visit my 6th graders, who I had reservations about because I didn't want to think I was a creeper or anything. It's huge, it's important, it really works.
And I didn't even plant her. Thanks. Awesome. And just so you know, this model actually started in high school. So for those of you who are like, how does this work for high school? A lot of times they just focus on maybe 9th and 11th grade and do blitz visits to those grades, because we know we lose a lot of kids in 9th and 11th. There's a lot of college prep. Next, a principal at Sabina de Sky Elementary, also in San Juan District, said, "I'm really seeing how much this initiative is impacting our relationships with families. Parents are willing to discuss issues as they come up and less defensive. We are seeing an improvement in the culture of our school as it relates to the community. This has been my favorite part of the Focus School initiative." Another principal at Thomas Jefferson Junior High School, again, this is not just for elementary school. There is a myth that parent engagement is not for the secondary level, but it's just as important. It just looks different. The word is spreading among parents, and we are having parents call and request their visit. The word is spreading among teachers, and teachers who had not done a visit are getting out and trying them. And finally, a parent at Granger Elementary School in Granite District said, "Personally, I like the home visits. It helps us build better relationships with Mr. Walker. Not feeling rushed like when parent-teacher conferences happen at school. We can get to every topic that is needed. Better understanding to help our kids to accomplish things at school, be able to set goals, and have the encouragement to be involved with our kids' life in school/activities and homework. Thank you for going out of your way to take your time to visit." Okay. So again, the different schools are tracking their progress. Like when you go into the school, you can see this is a big initiative. And so families are like, oh, what's going on? I want to learn more about that. So that's also really exciting. So again, our next initiative that we've seen, or we're starting to do more around the state. And again, I was a teacher who did these academic parent-teacher teams. So we were looking at our school in DC, and on a parent-teacher conference day, we did it in our district where the whole day was parent-teacher conference. And I would sit all day, and about 2 families would show up. And when those 2 families showed up, I got annoyed because I started to do things in my classroom. And so when they'd show up, I'm like, what are you doing here? No one else is coming. Why are you here, right? And I'm kind of thinking like, what's wrong with me? Like, where is my mind? And I just realized there was a disconnection between both of us, both parents and me as a teacher. And so when my school was like, we're going to try these new forms of parent-teacher conferences, I'm thinking like, how is this possible if families don't even come to the school? Like they don't come for regular parent-teacher conferences. Well, it turns out for us, once these home visits started happening and we were building relationships with families, parents that we never really saw started coming to school. So we were ready for APTT. So the APTT model, it's where classroom teachers invite all families of that class for 3 75-minute meetings, and they're held in the fall, winter, and spring, and 1 30-minute individual session, because we know families love that one-on-one time still. And so this is kind of an example of how the model could be. There are schools that are just doing 2 75-minute meetings and 1 individual meeting. But this is the model that is pushed. And so during the APTT meetings, teachers share student performance data that are actionable. They review grade level foundational skills, and they demonstrate concrete activities that families can do at home to help students master target concepts. And why this was important for us is that a lot of my parents were like, I want to help my kid, but I just don't know how. So when we brought them in and actually taught them, we're like, okay, so we know that multiplication is a big rock, or reading fluency is a big rock. We're going to give you things that you can do at home to help your kid, and you're going to make a 60-day goal with us so that we know that you're actually doing actionable things with your kids. This made a really big difference. And the families practice the activities with each other so they actually know how to do it. And then they come back in 60 days and we do another APTT meeting. Okay, so this is an example of like data that would be shared. So as you can see at the bottom, the students have a number that is only the parent knows. And when they're getting this folder, they're like, okay, So my child's number 12 or my child's 13. Okay, this is where my child is. In that first bar, you can see that's where I would say to the families, this is where I want your child to be right now. And the pink bar is where I want them to be by the end of the year. So every family knows that their kid can grow somehow. And so when I'm teaching them the game or the activities and they're making goals, they're like, okay, this is where I want my kid to go. In this state, currently, 18 of the 26 schools in cohort 1 of state turnaround are participating in APTT. And then 3 schools from Jordan were like, oh, we want in. They're not in turnaround, but they're also doing it. So here's a list of the different schools. And so as you can see, we've got a teacher at Woodrow Wilson Elementary in Granite District, just really modeling and showing families the activities. On this side, we have Mana Academy, where the families are looking through the data folders and saying, okay, this is where my kid is. This is where I want them to be before I make this SMART goal. And then we have our lovely teachers or administrators from a school in Jordan District who, for Halloween, dress up like APTT folders or like AP or something like that. So it's really awesome just to get the word out. And so this is a time for you to ask any questions that you might have about home visits or APTT. Yes. Okay, APTT at the high school level. So, and I'm just going to talk about even at the secondary level, it's not always academic skills. Generally at that level, it's a lot of college preparation or social skills. And so there is a bank of different APTT activities that the APTT people from West Ed kind of go over. And so you would tweak it to secondary. So I have a school in Granite District, Westlake Junior High School. And what they do is they kind of do it with their advisory teacher. And so that's how they go, like they're able to meet with all parents because we know not all kids go through the same teachers in a day. Does that answer your question? And yes. Yep. So great question. So I personally think the best thing to do would be to contact Dr. Donaldson or me. And then we can put you in contact with the people at West Ed. I will tell you the districts that support this do a much better job than it being just at the state level. We got it started in the state, but the goal is to really get districts to go and do this. So I can put you in contact with those people. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The question was, at her school, they've been doing it with preschool and have realized the impact it's made. And so it's kind of trickling up. And so is this training online? So the training is not online. And the reason why, there's a lot of conversations that need to happen at a specific school site. For example, what I might talk about in St. George might not be what I talk about in West Valley, right? Like when we're really talking about a community, we need to talk about the community and what the community needs are. What was your other question? Oh, yes, I definitely will come to St. George. So that's really funny. And here's just a really quick thing for St. George. So I have a friend she's just my friend. And she's like, you know, I'm really frustrated because my child's going into kindergarten and I rearranged my schedule to meet her kindergarten teacher. And she came for like 10 minutes. And I really thought this was going to be like a big conversation. And so families are actually really wanting this. They want to spend time with teachers Even though a lot of times I think teachers don't think families want that. That's just an assumption. Saw one more hand somewhere. Yes, Cami. Let me give you the mic, actually. And I meant to give you both the mic. I'm sorry.
Oh, not really a question, but I was just going to say, kind of to a plug for them. In Granite School District, we have quite a few schools that have done the home visits and the APTT, and I actually pulled aside the principals and we did a little roundtable discussion asking them about it, and they were overwhelmingly, the home visits, they were extremely positive about. And even when we said, okay, you'd have to use your own Title I funding, they were all saying, yes, definitely. They would never not do it. So it was worth it to them very much. And also was very positive with the APTT as well. But it was an adjustment for parents because they're so used to one kind of thing. And then I was going to add, with the home visits, we did have a school that they heard about it and they're like, oh, we're going to go do home visits. Well, they had no clue what they were doing, and it was not the best thing. So I would recommend that they do training, because if you don't understand the model, it could go completely wrong. So, because I could just imagine what teachers think that they could go and home visit and who they're visiting and what they think they're talking about. And so it could go wrong. So I would just recommend that you definitely get the training as well.
Thank you. I did plant her. No, I'm just kidding. I did not. Yes.
I'll just add one other thing. When we asked our teachers to do this, we didn't pay them. We offered to buy them lunch in between home visits. And the next year they just did it without anything because they saw the value.
Good. Yeah, that is actually really true. In this model, though, compensation is a non-negotiable. Like, we want to treat our teachers like professionals as they are. And so compensation can look in a lot of different ways. Some schools do time off. Some schools give a stipend and say, between this amount and this amount, you can get this amount of money, so compensation looks different in a lot of ways. Okay. Yes.
You had your training dates listed, and I tried to take a picture, but I couldn't. The writing was kind of small. I'm not sure if we can. Is there a way for you to send that out to us, or? Okay, that would be helpful. Thank you.
The whole PowerPoint will be sent out. Yes. And so thank you again, Cami, for that. I know I'm really great at telling you about home visits, so you feel really ready to tell your staff about it, but the training actually is important, the whole 2.5 hours. And I was joking about being really great at telling you about home visits, but I know sometimes people are like, oh, I get it. I can share that with my staff. It's more than that. So, are there any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Donaldson. We just felt like this initiative is it's really moving in the state, and so it's not just for turnaround schools. Really, I'm getting calls from all over, and I mean, when I get a call from Enoch, that makes me happy. That's exciting, and so yes. So thank you very much.
Yeah, getting better information out to people on parent engagement was one of my dreams when I joined the Title I team about 8 or 9 years ago. So when Cheryl joined our staff, it's been about 2 years ago that Cheryl came. It was like a dream come true for me because she'd actually done some of these things. And these are evidence-based parent engagement practices. So again, going back to the need to have evidence-based things, they have data on these two programs to show that they really do make a difference and can impact student achievement. So next, we're going to move on to Sandy Grant, and she'll talk to you about UCA monitoring and all of those great things that Sandy does for us.
Yeah, right. I can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So a couple of things just to start off with. Number one, a lot of you got letters just recently and you're going, what the heck is this? This is a late notification of stuff that's already in UCA that you've already adjusted your budgets for. So don't worry about it. It's something you've already taken care of. So, as mentioned before, we did get an extra allocation from the feds in their infinite wisdom, the last minute. So we have reallocated that, but I also looked at, a while back, I asked each of you, what is the amount of money that is just ridiculous to try and reallocate? What is your limit? How much money, is this too much? Is this too little? So each of you gave me that information. Those of you that are brand new and didn't give me that information, I took kind of an average of what the others were and applied that to you. So if the amount of reallocation was below what you told me was, necessary to reallocate or wasn't worth your time to reallocate, then we did not reallocate you money in this last. So some of the reallocations, were turning out to be $15. It's not kind of worth your time to reallocate $15. So we did that. So some of you will be getting additional letters, some of you will not. The information hopefully will go into UCA this coming week. We are redoing and looking at all of the transactions and making sure all the numbers are correct so we won't have to fix it again. So that's coming out. I'm also told this morning that the reallocation will be ready next week. So I'm hoping it's not next Friday, but somewhere early so we can get the information out to you. But as soon as it's ready to go, we'll try and get it into UCA so you'll immediately have that. I know you can't work on anything in UCA until you have an allocation, because if you don't have an allocation, they don't think you have a grant, therefore you can't do anything. So all of those above things will be happening hopefully next week. Questions about that? So if you want UCA training, will you please email me so we know whether or not we have to have one training or more than one training, and if we need to move it in different areas of the state because of the number of people that want it. So if you will email me that so I can kind of put that together, and then Kelly and I will put together the training and do that locations. We can ask Natalie to do it, but Kelly and I are probably more in tune with UCA than Natalie is. So Kelly and I will put together the trainings, but if you will just email me so I can decide how many we'll have to do. My email, sandra.grant@schools, plural, .utah spelled out, .gov. Questions? All right, in your packet you have a little yellow sheet. On one side is our 5-year rotation. So that's kind of gives you an idea of if we're not this year, what year we'll be coming to visit you. For those of you that are brand new charter schools, what happens is we do technical assistance the first year of your existence, and we do an on-site monitoring the second year to make sure that you're on track and are not getting behind and losing things. So we try to do that. So that's our kind of our 5-year plan right now that's in front of you. So you can kind of look at to see when you will be monitored. If you're in the first column, that means we monitored you this last year and you'll be moved to the end of the line for the next one. On the other side of that is our tentative schedule. Now, with the exception that I've got February 29th on there, which really should be the 28th. Look at that and see if that will kind of fit into your schedule. There are some of the larger districts, and as we get larger charter school groups, that we may change that too, but if it doesn't say more than 1 day, then it's only 1 day. Otherwise, it's going to be a 2-day, because we have to visit more than one school. And nobody will miss Craig more than me. So we'll see how that works out. We're also trying this year on the monitoring to do more than one group. So if you have a school and improvement, we'll probably try and do that monitoring at the same time, so you don't have two different ones coming in. We're also looking at some of the other programs in our section, not just the title programs. But now I don't know how many of you got visited by the at-risk student group, but they may be coming in with us too at the same time. So we're trying to limit the number of times you've got people coming in and disrupting. So we are going to try to do that. I don't know how successful we'll be this year, but we are going to try that. The other thing is, right now, the DMI, we're going to move to cycle 2 this year. So you'll have the annual and the cycle 2. We may do some upgradings on this, but not all the information is in. Our plan hasn't been accepted. So some of the 18th, we have that scheduled for this room on the 18th. We'll be doing it half a day, and then we'll do it live stream so that it'll be archived, so those of you that couldn't actually be here in person can still get the training. So we will go over that. We'll try to do DMI training about the same time, so those of you that need that can also do that. Questions? What else do I need to talk? Yeah. The DMI is going to change. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to change it yet. But for right now, we're going to use the current system that's in there. And I'm not going to make major changes this year until, number one, our plan is approved and we know exactly what we need to monitor and what we need to look at. So for right now, it's basically going to stay the same as it has been. I know time and effort documentation will be the same. I know that highly qualified is kind of iffy, but if the state approves your teachers right now for a license, then they'll be considered highly qualified. So the highly qualified in your CARAs will be the same. They've got to either take the Praxis 48 semester hours or 60 quarter hours of training and a high school diploma. That's got to be the first step. So those things will still stay the same. So I think the major things are going to stay the same. We're going to do MOE will be figured the same way. It'll be a little bit different on when you get dinged as far as money goes, but it's still figured the same way. You need to spend 90% of what you spent last year in state and local funds to match it. That's a matching requirement. So if you're going to use your Title I money for something else, make sure that that match still stays in there. You know, you don't want to get dinged on that because your match is not right. Those kinds of things. Other questions? Yes. It will change slightly, but I don't think it'll be major changes. If you look at the school-wide packet that's in your packet, it does talk about some of the things that are going to be emphasized a little more, But as I read through that, most of that stuff has already been in there, just not emphasized as much as it is now. So basically, it'll be the same. If you're writing a template now, I would look at that packet and make sure that you cover those particular items in there. Monitoring will be basically the same as it has been. We're not going to do major changes until we find out all the ins and outs. We're doing webinars right now on monitoring on what has to be. And so we are going to change some of the citations we'll have to change. So as we're looking at that, we'll start changing that for the following year. Other questions? So when Natalie was talking about the new system coming on, what they're hoping will happen, and that's a big hope, is that a lot of the information that's in UCA will be automatically transferred over, so you won't have to do a lot of major changes, and hopefully everything will work out. So last word I heard is that we at the office would start to get trained in about 6 to 9 months. So once we're trained, then we'll start setting up a training for you guys so that you'll know what's going to happen. Okay, so send me your emails for UCA so we can get those set up, and we'll try and get those set up in August so that you're ready, because UCA is due in November and DMI is due in December. Also know that we're looking at risk management kinds of things for monitoring. So things that we're going to look at are, do you miss deadlines? Are you not sending in more than one reimbursement request? And I'm still auditing those periodically, so be aware of that. Are you not attending things that you're supposed to be? Things are not on time, all of that kind of stuff. So that puts you at a higher risk if you're missing deadlines, if you're, excuse me, you're not sending in reimbursements on a timely basis, you know, so that puts you at a higher risk. That means I'm going to be looking at things more closely. So it's all those fun things that we have to do. Other questions?
Thank you, Sandy. So we're almost at the end of our meeting. As Sandy mentioned, if you look down at the bottom, we have scheduled the training for new Title I directors, Monday, September 18th, 1 to 4 in this room. Will also be streamed live and recorded. But in addition to that, I know that there are some of you here today that are actually new to your role with Title I in your own LEA. If you call us or send us an email at any time, Sandy and I or other members of the staff are happy as well to travel to you and sit down with you and spend however much time you need, having us talk you through, you know, what are the requirements of Title I? What do I need to be paying attention to? What are the things that, you know, like looking across the calendar of a year, what needs to be done when? We're more than happy to do that. You're welcome to come here at any time as well, but we're happy to just come and meet with you in your office when you have time, and we can just, you know, work with you one-on-one as much as necessary. So don't ever hesitate to ask for that. Kathy? So for those of you listening online, they've asked that we repeat the question. The question that Kathy asked was, Will there be a meeting time when people can come with their DMI and get some assistance in just sitting down in a meeting and completing that? The answer to that is yes. It may be in conjunction with the new Title I directors, but in the past, we've generally done it in conjunction with a regular Title I directors meeting, because everyone would need to complete that, not just new Title I directors. So we'll probably maybe do it in conjunction as well with the fall Title I directors meeting, which is the next thing I'd like to talk to you about, and that is looking at the coming school year. How many Title I directors meetings would you like to have? How long do you want those meetings to last? Are a half-day meeting like we've done these last couple, are those sufficient? In the past, we used to do full-day meetings, but we were able at that time to provide lunches for you. If we do full-day now, we're not allowed to provide any food or refreshments, so it would mean taking a lunch break, dismissing, and then coming back. In the past, when we did full-day meetings, we were able to have LEAs and schools come in and share really promising practices that they were implementing and having success with, which I think a lot of people liked because they were able to take ideas from those presentations and then go back to their own context and consider how they might implement some of those things within their own situations. So with the half-day meetings, it becomes more of just giving information and updates. There's not really a lot of time for professional development. Also, where do we want those meetings to take place? Do you want to come here where we have the ability to record them and stream them live? Many of you have been generous in offering locations. We've met at Jordan District's Auxiliary Center. Karen Sterling was willing to let us come to Canyon District's center and use their facilities. We've met before in Granite's Education Center. So let's just take some time and discuss this. And I'd like some of my staff, if they've got their notebooks handy, to take some notes for me and help capture the information. So first of all, let's talk about how many meetings during the year would be useful to you. I know the curriculum directors meet like 4 times a year. Christelle meets with Title III directors, I think 4 or 5 times a year. Traditionally, Title I for many years, since Carl Wilson was here, met in the spring and again in the fall. And it was 2 full days, just twice a year. This year we had to move to half-day meetings due to the lunch situation. So let's talk about, first of all, how many meetings a year do you want? Kathy? So Kathy suggested, with all of the changes coming forth with ESSA, that perhaps even at least for this coming school year, that we meet more frequently, more than twice a year, just to make sure people have those updates. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Yes, Brett? Yeah, would you do that, Lisa? That would be great.
So the comment for those of us that wear more than one hat is just so that those aren't all scheduled on the same week or two. So between curriculum, assessment, Title I, ESL, that they're not all held on the same week or the same 2 weeks.
Okay, so the comment from Brett was to try not to schedule meetings during the same week, for example, that the curriculum directors or Title III directors or assessment directors or other groups are meeting, because many of you wear multiple hats and attend multiple meetings. Arlene was commenting that from a rural perspective, for those that have to travel, that it might be better if they were 2 days back to back, and then that alleviates, or like Lynette coming clear from San Juan, she could come up, spend a night, go to 2 meetings and make 1 trip out of it, rather than having to either travel multiple times or try to listen to meetings online, when sometimes you'd rather be there in person where you can talk to people, ask follow-up questions. Okay, so those are some good things to consider. And we'll certainly coordinate with our colleagues, with curriculum directors and Christelle and others that our assessment people and others that hold those other meetings that many of you have to attend as well, so that we can coordinate that. So are you thinking like maybe 4 meetings this coming year? Is that too many? Too many? Jane Ann?
We were just having a side conversation about the day is going to absorb the day's work, but some people they might.
Okay.
So some of maybe even some.
All right, so Jane Ann's comment was the people that she was sitting with here were talking about the half-day sessions seem to be a good format, because we give information and then they're able to have time to digest and think about that information. And then they're always able to ask questions or follow up by phone or email, or follow up at the next meeting. And so sometimes to sit through a full day meeting maybe kind of becomes a lot of information to take in 1 day. Any others want to weigh in on the half day versus the full day?
I was just going to mention that St. George would be pleased to offer a large room in January when you guys can't see across the street.
Yay, Kathy. So maybe we could do a little bit longer visit in St. George, and yeah, you could get away from the winter and enjoy some nice warmer weather. And so that's some things we can consider moving them around regionally. I know the curriculum directors have done that, where they've moved them to various parts of the state. Lynette? Oh, at Navajo Mountain, Lynette says. If we could all get there without getting lost. Well, certainly Monument Valley would be lovely. Okay, so we have, so we'll consider that as well, having them maybe regionally a little bit. Looking at the half days, maybe occasionally, maybe once a year, maybe having a full day meeting and bring some people in from schools and districts that can present some of the promising things that they're doing. So thank you. That's some really good information for us to consider. What we will do is look at some dates. We'll talk to our other colleagues here at the office about when their meetings are being scheduled, and then we will send out some tentative information and have you weigh in on it so that we can choose some appropriate locations and dates for those meetings. Our committee of practitioners, we met in the fall, and we have some openings on that committee. We really need to meet more than just once a year, especially now that we've got a lot of issues to bring to their attention with ESSA. But currently, we need someone to represent local boards of education. So if any of you are aware of some people that serve on your local school board or your charter board that would be willing to serve in that regard, we would love to have them join us. We also need some parent representation. We've had a parent whose name has been on there, but that person hasn't attended a meeting for quite some time. So may not be available anymore, but we're always looking to have people to join that committee. We bring decisions before that group and talk about different policies and issues that we try to have them give us some feedback on. And we just meet, usually they're 2-hour meetings. We can also set those up so that we could have them online as well if we have people from some of the rural areas that would like to serve on that committee but aren't able to travel here to be at a meeting in person. So we'll send out more information and have you be thinking about some people that may serve on that committee, or maybe some of you would like to serve as well at some time. Do you have any other questions at this time that any of us can try to respond to? We may not have the answers right now, but we can certainly do some research and get back to you, or anything else we can do to support you at this point. Okay, again, I just really want to thank you for being here. I know it takes a chunk of your time and energy to be away from your office. It's busy. You're trying to get budgeting and everything done. As soon as we get those preliminary allocations for the next school year from our finance people, we will let you know. And as soon as we can get the UCA up and running, we'll let you know that as well. So again, thank you. Please have a safe travels back to your home or offices, and we'll be here if you have questions that you'd like to talk to us about. Have a great day. Thank you.